this morning. Good morning and welcome to the 31st meeting of the Health, Social Care and Sport Committee in 2025. I've received apologies for today's meeting from Sandesh Gohani and David Torrance. Our first agenda item today is to consider correspondence received by the committee from Jeremy Balfour, which raises certain points about the relationship between the Assisted Dying for Terminally Ill Adults Scotland Bill and the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. I refer members and anyone watching to the note by the clerk of the public papers for this meeting, which provides some useful background information. And to begin, I'd like to invite Mr Balfour to make a few opening remarks about his correspondence.
Good morning, Convener. Good morning, Committee. Thank you for this opportunity. I will keep these brief, as I know you have a long day ahead. Once Stage 2 has been completed, in my letter, am suggesting and asking that the committee writes to the UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities to ask them whether they believe this bill is in line with the Convention and that persons with disabilities are not ill affected by this bill. The advantage for doing it at this point is that if the committee come back and give it a clean bill of health, then that will obviously give reassurance to the whole Parliament. If they want to make any comment, it would then give opportunity for members to put down amendments at Stage 3 to allow that to be clarified. The reason for doing it at this stage is that I think none of us, if this bill was to pass, want to get to a point where a bill is passed and then is then challenged in the courts on any ground at all. And I think this is a belt and braces approach to give the whole Parliament confidence that persons with disabilities are not going to be convened by this bill, and if they are at the moment, then any amendments could be brought forward. Obviously, ultimately, it is for the Parliament, for us as MSPs, to make the final decision, but this committee is there to advise and to help, and it would be my suggestion that, as convener on behalf of the committee, once Stage 2 has been completed, then we write so that this clarification can be sought so that amendments could be lodged if required. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Balfour. I'd now like to invite Liam MacArthur, as member in charge of the bill, to comment on the contents of Mr Balfour's correspondence.
Thank you, Convener. Can I thank Mr Balfour for setting out the rationale for his position. Can I also thank the committee again for the extensive scrutiny it's undertaken through Stage 1 now into Stage 2. The Stage 1 scrutiny included evidence on the bill's protections for vulnerable groups in the context of the right to life, both under the European Convention of Human Rights and the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, including Article 12. At Stage 2, close to 300 amendments have been lodged aimed at further strengthening the carefully considered safeguards in the bill, and in the interest of time I will not reprise these. Stage 2 amendments relating to age, capacity, detection of coercion, palliative care have all already been debated, and many are still to be considered. An amendment raising the age limit for requesting an assisted death from 16 to 18 has already been agreed. So too was my amendment including a for the avoidance of doubt provision that no one can be considered as meeting the terminally ill definition only because they have a disability or mental disorder. Turning to the question of coercion, I'd point the committee to the policy memorandum relating to equalities and human rights issue. Paragraph 99 states there have been various cases brought before the European Court of Human Rights arguing that the prohibition of lack of availability of assisted dying is a breach of ECHR. Whilst these cases have not been upheld, the Court has not stated that assisted dying is either compatible or incompatible with ECHR. The approach of the Court to date has been to recognise that countries or jurisdictions are better placed than the Court to decide on nationally sensitive issues. This is known as the margin of appreciation. I'd also remind members that I completed a Equalities Impact Assessment for the bill sent to the committee and available on the webpage. Furthermore, extensive written and oral evidence was received at Stage 1 on issues relating to people with a disability, which is reflected in the committee's Stage 1 report. I've also previously cited research by Dr Ben Colburn and others, which concludes that people with disabilities are not generally opposed to assisted dying laws. Assisted dying laws do not harm people with disabilities. Assisted dying laws do not show disrespect for people with disabilities, and assisted dying laws don't damage healthcare for people with disabilities. On the issue of coercion raised by Mr Balfour, can I also refer members to my response to the Chief Executive of the Scottish Partnership for Palliative Care, which was copied to MSPs last week, again, which is a matter of record. This makes clear how my intention and indeed understanding is that doctors will use the full extent of the GMC guidance and relevant training and experience when making assessments. I therefore believe the bill is consistent with other relevant legislation and with professional practice. It ensures safeguards remain robust, clear and enforceable, while allowing professional guidance to continue supporting clinicians in identifying more subtle or indirect influences in practice. Amendments to further refine coercion on the face of the bill have been and will be debated and decided upon by the committee. I believe, however, that the terms coercion and pressure are well understood. Indeed, I note the Scottish Government commented that providing a definition of coercion that brings in broader internalised pressures could have the opposite effect and create uncertainty. I endorse the UN Committee's role in monitoring the practical application of national legislation in the context of UN CRPD. However, Mr Balfour's proposal that a final vote on stage 3 not take place until the UN Committee has certified the bill aligns with the Convention would, in my view, not only interfere with decisions taken by the committee at stage 2, but also preempt the legitimate scrutiny process of this Parliament, the remainder of stage 2 and amending part of stage 3, which is still to come. I therefore don't believe it would be appropriate to seek to interfere with the legitimate processes of this Parliament, which include a lengthy and thorough scrutiny process at stage 1, which resulted in the Parliament agreeing the general principles of the bill. Mr Balfour would still be free to engage with the UN Committee, but I believe the Committee, this Parliament and the public can have confidence in the robust process of scrutiny being applied to this bill. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Mr MacArthur. Before I propose a course of action, does any member of the committee wish to comment on Mr Balfour's correspondence? Joe Fitzpatrick.
Thanks very much, Convener. First of all, to say that I really appreciate Jeremy Balfour's contribution to the committee. He has made sure that we are thinking about the issues really carefully. But I do understand Mr Balfour's position on the bill. He doesn't support the bill, and I respect that. I think what Mr Balfour is proposing here would be a new procedure for the Parliament. And if the Parliament believes that we need a new procedure, then that would be something that we should take through the Standards Committee and look at if we feel there should be a new procedure. But I don't think it's appropriate to bring in a new procedure to the Parliament in this way. And I don't think it's required. The topic that Mr Balfour is raising here is one that we considered in great depth. We took lots of evidence at stage 1, and that's all there for folk to look at online to understand the evidence that, as a committee, we did receive. So I would propose that we thank Mr Balfour for his suggestion, but politely decline.
Patrick Harvey.
Thank you. In addition to the points that Joe Fitzpatrick makes, I'd like to make clear my strong support for the principle that the Parliament as a whole is compliant with human rights in the broadest sense. The existing means to do that are that the member in charge, as well as the presiding officer, have to satisfy themselves in relation to the human rights issues. And any legislation that we pass which is found not to be compliant with human rights is not law. I think that's the appropriate and very strong safeguard against any impact on human rights in the broadest sense, and I think that's the appropriate way for us to proceed.
Anyone else wish to make comment? Can I ask Mr Balfour, obviously Scotland would not be the first country to pass assisted dying legislation, and there's a similar process going on in the Westminster Parliament. Has the UN made any comment on existing legislation or on the legislation at Westminster?
Yes, we have, is the answer to that. I mean, I suppose the point I am trying to make, and I understand Mr MacArthur's point, is the only point I was trying to make, and Mr Fitzpatrick is correct to some extent, is that when we come to stage 3, I am wanting, if this bill goes through, to make sure that it is competent and that we don't, as Mr Harvey points out, then have to face a legal action post that. And I think this would give the UN committee an opportunity not to tell us what to do, but simply to point out if there were areas that they thought required stage 3 amendments. Because where we could end up is with a bill that is passed by this Parliament and there are one or two amendments which convene, and then the court strikes down the whole law, and then we're back to stage one. So my suggestion is trying to be, to some extent, helpful to Mr MacArthur, in that it is making sure that the sign-off takes place, and that if there are issues, those can be debated at stage 3 rather than post in the courts. So that is my simple, but if, as I said, the committee are not for that, I absolutely understand that.
You mentioned there, Mr Balfour, that other jurisdictions have sought an opinion. What was the opinion that came back?
I don't have the detail on that, but what we look at is obviously each piece of legislation is different. So what we comment on is whether it is in line with the disability issues.
Brian Whittle.
Thank you, convener. Just I have to follow up to the convener's questions there. There obviously are assisted dying bills or assisted dying across other jurisdictions. I wonder whether or not the issue is you feel that there are elements of this bill that differ from everything else that require more scrutiny.
I wonder, can I bring my colleague Pam Duncan-Clancy in to answer? I think she has more knowledge on this particular area than I do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good morning to the committee and others. Thank you, convener, for allowing me to mention this. The most recent concluding observation by the UN Committee on the rights of disabled people in relation to Canada, as an example, said that Track 2 made is for people with disabilities whose deaths are not reasonably foreseeable, which is similar given the current bill in the Scottish Parliament doesn't have a proximity to death definition in it. And the CRPD committee says, and I quote, "It is based on negative ableist perceptions of the quality and value of the life of persons with disabilities, including that suffering is intrinsic to disability rather than the fact that inequality and discrimination cause a compound suffering for persons with disabilities." The UN is clear that and this is what the Canada Disabled People's Organisations in Canada said, the UN is clear that we must do better in upholding the rights and dignity of persons with disabilities. Among the recommendations were to repeal Track 2 of MAID, implement a coordinated deinstitutionalisation strategy and withdraw the interpretive declaration in reservation to Article 12. So there were a number of different concluding observations in relation to the very specific aspect of the current bill facing the Scottish Parliament that were made. And the only way that the UN committee, which is a committee of experts of disabled people, can give any advice to the Scottish Parliament is if a body such as either the committee or the government themselves make that request, which is why I think it's important that the committee do seriously consider the request put to them today.
Helena Whittam.
Thanks very much, convener, and thanks to Pam Duncan-Clancy for putting that on the record. I think the difference that we have is we don't have a Track 2 as proposed under the bill that we have before us. And I think Liam MacArthur's amendments that actually made sure that we don't have consideration of somebody as being terminally ill by dint of having a disability or a mental health condition. So I think that I'm pretty convinced that we're not along the same lines as what is in existence in Canada, and I don't think the UN committee would see that we do.
So the committee has a decision then to make whether to write to the UN or not to write to the UN. And just for clarity, the committee, the UN Convention, or the United Nations Committee, meets infrequently, relatively infrequently, and it may not be possible for them to respond within the time frame before we would get to stage 3, should the committee wish to proceed with this. And I'm not proposing that a letter or lack thereof would interfere with the legislative process that the Scottish Parliament has timetabled. So I'm looking for some indication from the committee about whether they wish to write or not. Mr Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, so I propose that we do not write.
Mr Whittle.
I don't see if there's no interference with the legislative process. I don't see any reason at all why we wouldn't write.
Necessary.
Okay. So committee's not agreed, so therefore we will need to go to a vote.
So the question
So the question is that the committee writes to the UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities to ask them to express a view on whether the Assisted Dying for Terminally Ill Adult Scotland Bill is compatible with the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Those in agreement with that? Those against? Abstentions? So the result of the vote is that 4 members are in agreement, 2 against, and there were 2 abstentions. Therefore, the committee will write to the United Nations. Our second item on the agenda today is day 3 of stage 2 proceedings on the Assisted Dying for Terminally Ill Scotland Bill at stage 2. Let me begin this item by formally welcoming to the committee Liam MacArthur, member in charge of the bill, and a number of other members who have lodged amendments to the bill. Depending on the progress we make at this morning's meeting, the committee may continue stage 2 proceedings from 6 p.m. this evening. As members will be aware, the debate on the group assessments of the terminally ill adult was commenced but not concluded on day 2 of the stage 2 proceedings. The debate on this group will now continue where it left off, with Jeremy Balfour, Stuart McMillan and Paul Sweeney still to speak to the amendments in the group, and Pam Duncan-Glancy to wind up. And I call Jeremy Balfour to speak to Amendment 157 and other amendments in the group.
Thank you, and I'm sure the committee will be glad to hear that these are the last amendments that I am moving, so you will not hear my voice again. Can I talk to Amendment 157? This amendment follows on from other amendments that were debated in this section already. It looks to strengthen the assessment process for anyone requesting assisted dying. It would mean before approval, a person must be seen by a psychiatrist and a social worker. The doctor leading the process would then take into account what professionals say before making their final decision. This amendment is about making sure that the decision to die is made freely and with full understanding of what it means. These are deeply complex and emotional situations, as we all acknowledge. People may be facing pain, fear, isolation or pressure, and these factors can affect how they think and feel. A psychiatrist can help identify whether someone's judgment is being clouded by depression, anxiety or another treatable condition. A social work can help uncover whether a person is feeling lonely, unsupported or under pressure, perhaps feeling they are a burden to others. Bringing in these perspectives doesn't delay or deny that choice, but it protects it and makes it more safeguard. The amendment gives a public reassurance that the process will be careful and humane. It ensures that every request is looked at from all sides, so that any decision made truly reflects the individual's own free and informed will. Amendment 159 comes to another issue which I think is essential when it comes to life and death. Doctors need to know exactly what the law expects of them. If it's ever unclear, if the wording is unclear, it can lead to hesitation, mistakes, or even uneven interpretation, and ultimately could lead to lots of legal cases happening here in Scotland. This amendment removes any doubt and makes the responsibility of medical practitioners clear and unambiguous. We owe it both to the professionals and to the lawmakers that no doctor has ever to guess what Parliament meant or has to look back and see if it can interpret it themselves. A clear law is safe law for everyone involved. Finally, in Amendment 160, the amendment removes the phrase "in other case" from Section 7 of the bill. On the face of it, this might sound like a very small change, but I believe it is an important one. The current wording could be read to suggest that doctors have different responsibilities in different circumstances. That, I don't think, is what Mr MacArthur has intended. The duties of medical practitioners to check that someone has capacity, is acting voluntarily and meets off eligible criteria would apply equally in every case. By removing these words, we make the law clear and more consistent. It ensures that there is no room for confusion or uneven treatment between different cases, whether that is geographical or types of condition. This amendment makes it clear the bill is strong. If this was accepted, the bill would be stronger, simpler and faster. It helps doctors follow the law with confidence, and it will give reassurance to the public that the same high standards will apply to every person, whoever they are, wherever they live, whatever the condition, in every case. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Mr Balfour. Bob Doris to speak to Stuart McMillan's Amendment 232 and other amendments in the group.
Thank you, Convener. I'll restrict myself just to Mr McMillan's amendments, who's asked me to, who can't be here this morning, and sends his apologies. I'll begin with Amendment 117, which actually amends one of my own amendments within the group. The bill requires a registered medical practitioner to confirm that a person meets the criteria for terminal illness. That is essential, but it is not enough. Trust, transparency and accountability are fundamental in healthcare. We cannot legislate for assisted dying without protecting these principles. Ms McMillan is concerned that, without safeguards, a patient dissatisfied with one practitioner's refusal could simply seek another willing to provide the statement. This scenario would not only undermine the integrity of the assisted dying process, it could erode public trust in the health service itself. A system that allows repeated solicitation for an irreversible act of life-ending intervention is unsound. Ms McMillan's amendment introduces a practical safeguard. Any refusal by a registered medical practitioner to provide a statement under Section 6 must be recorded in the patient's medical record, along with the reasons for that refusal. Furthermore, it prevents assessment for the same request for a period of 6 months. Stuart McMillan acknowledged Mr MacArthur's comments last week in relation to this, and he noted that Mr MacArthur's comments last week suggested that a 6-month time period was arbitrary. That could be suggested about any timescale and age available throughout the bill. In effect, I suppose wherever you draw the line is in itself an arbitrary decision, I think, with Mr McMillan's point. Mr McMillan thought the 6-month figure was a reasonable timescale. This reduces the risk of repeated requests and doctor shopping, whilst preserving existing provisions for referral to a specialist where there is doubt about the patient's terminal illness or capacity. This is not about limiting patient choice, it is about ensuring that choice is exercised responsibly, ethically and with integrity. It ensures that the medical profession can act confidently, knowing the professional judgment is respected, that the process cannot be manipulated. That was Amendment 117A. In the same group, Mr McMillan also says Amendment 232. And Mr McMillan would comment that the bill is currently drafted does not require a person seeking assisted death to consult a specialist in their condition to determine whether they truly meet the criteria of terminal illness. This is a significant gap. Prognosis is not an exact science. It varies by individual, by treatment and by circumstance. Without specialist input, there is a real risk that someone with many years of life ahead could be permitted to proceed down an irreversible path. That is why it is essential that every assessment be informed by the most accurate expert knowledge available. This amendment addresses that risk. It requires that in all assessments under Section 6, the medical practitioner must consult a specialist in a person's terminal condition and take their opinion into account. Mr McMillan would note Liam MacArthur's comments last week indicating he thought this amendment mirrored Section 7(2)(b), but Stuart McMillan contests that comment. The important word is may. That is not a guarantee that a registered medical professional and the relevant specialism will be involved. Amendment 232 puts it beyond doubt, ensures that decisions are based on the expertise of those who understand the specific trajectory and prognosis of the illness in question. And with that, I conclude Mr McMillan's comments on his 2 amendments in this group.
Thank you, Mr Doris. Paul Sweeney to speak to Amendment 239 and other amendments in the group.
Thank you, Convener. I move that Amendments 239, 240 and 241 stand part of the bill, because this will make sure that the bill, if passed, actually works in practice. That means ensuring that doctors feel that they can participate safely and confidently without undue risk of criticism. At present, the bill places a very heavy burden on doctors to make all the key judgments about eligibility. The Medical and Dental Defence Union of Scotland's concern in this regard is that this creates a significant medical legal risk for them, one that could deter clinicians from participation at all. So these amendments would create a multidisciplinary panel to act as the final assessor of a patient once the statements from both the coordinating and independent doctors have been submitted. This panel would review all evidence, confirm that the person meets the criteria and issue a certificate of eligibility if satisfied that that is appropriate. The intention of these amendments is not to obstruct the bill, but to ensure that decisions are consistent and transparent. In effect, the panel would offer a final level of assurance for both patients and clinicians, confirming that all the necessary conditions have been met before assisted dying can proceed.
Pam Duncan-Glancy to wind up and press or withdraw Amendment 229.
Thank you, Convener. I'll press Amendment 229. I think we've had much debate in this particular group, including from last week, so I'll try and be brief in my remarks, but remind us also of some of the discussion we had last week, so I think is important. Checks and balances in legislation like this, particularly when we are discussing a matter of life and death, are crucial. And members have asked whether I think the referrals in my amendments come at the end point and whether that is too late, and perhaps suggesting that this is an issue with the drafting. The fact is, though, that the referrals don't readily happen. Referrals to social work, referrals to disabled people's organisations to help disabled people or terminally ill people understand what it could be like to have to live with a life that means you've lost function of some description, don't happen all that readily. And that's why I think it's important that in this legislation, if in no other, although it should be in other legislation too, but we have one piece of legislation in front of us today on this, then they must be in place. I'm adding them to the bill because, as a last resort, I think that surely when we are considering life and death, Parliament must contend that these provisions are crucial, even if they cannot provide them before it. Many disabled people talk of how disabled people's organisations changed their lives, helped them see that life was indeed worth living. And I note some of the comments made last week, particularly from my colleague Liam MacArthur, that these are subjective, and that is true, but so too is the level of tolerance that people have for loss, and so too is the desire to live or die. People seeking to end their lives must have access to that emancipatory support. Without it, I think life may appear for some intolerable. And right now, these organisations are on their knees, and there was questions of capacity. But there is no requirement to meet requirements on social care or housing, or indeed to prevent poverty. And I think Liam MacArthur was right last week to raise questions of local authorities' abilities to meet requirements on Article 19. Indeed, they do readily, I'm sure, fall short due to the lack of resources they get. But my amendments are an 11th hour attempt to force action on the human rights of disabled people that Parliament must surely ensure we put in place to make it easier to live, if we are also going to legislate, should the bill progress to stage 3 and pass, to help people die. Furthermore, I'd suggest that rather than reject amendments and in the absence of solid mitigation against such intolerable circumstances, fears proffered that people won't declare money concerns, for example, or feeling like a burden so that they may be supported to die, would be better addressed, I believe, by ensuring these amendments to legislation are made so that it's easier to live than to reject them, as has been the case so far. Convener, these are reasoned amendments. They protect disabled people's human rights and, indeed, people with terminal illnesses' human rights, and I'd encourage the committee to support them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Duncan-Glancy. The question is that Amendment 229 be agreed. Are we all agreed? Committee is not agreed, so we will go to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 229? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 229 is 2 for, 6 against. There were no abstentions and the amendment is disagreed. I call Amendment 87 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 220. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Moved, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 87 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee's not agreed. We will go to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 87? Those against? Abstentions? result of the vote on Amendment 87 is 2 for, 6 against. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. I call Amendment 88 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 229. I remind members that if Amendment 88 is agreed to, I cannot call Amendments 50, 89 and 12 due to pre-emption. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Moved, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 88 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Committee is not agreed. Those in favour of the amendment? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 88 is 6 for, 1 against and 1 abstention. Therefore, the amendment is agreed. 67. So I call Amendment 67 in the name of Liam MacArthur, already debated with Amendment 65. Liam MacArthur, to move or not move?
Move, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 67 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee is agreed. I call Amendment 230 in the name of Paul Sweeney, already debated with Amendment 65. Paul Sweeney, to move or not move?
Move, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 230 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Committee is agreed. I call Amendment 68 in the name of Jackie Bailey, already debated with Amendment 65. Jackie Bailey, to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is Amendment 68 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee is not agreed. We will therefore go to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 68? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 68 is 3 for, 5 against. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. I'll call Amendment 154 in the name of Miles Briggs, already debated with Amendment 151. Miles Briggs, to move or not move?
Not moved.
I call Amendment 155 in the name of Brian Whittle, already debated with Amendment 65. Brian Whittle, to move or not move?
I think, given Mr MacArthur's offer of a bit of collaboration and clearing up the wording, bringing back at stage 3, I will not move at this point.
Thank you, Mr Whittle. The question is that Section 6 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? I call Amendment 69 in the name of Liam MacArthur, already debated with Amendment 229. Liam MacArthur, to move or not move?
Move, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 69 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Committee's agreed. I call Amendment 90 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 229. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Moved, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 90 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Committee is agreed. I call Amendment 231 in the name of Pam Duncan-Glancy, already debated with Amendment 229. Pam Duncan-Glancy, to move or not move?
Move, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 231 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee is not agreed. We'll go to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 231? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 231 is 2 for, 6 against. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. I call Amendment 91 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated, with Amendment 229. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Moved, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 91 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee's not agreed. We'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 91? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 91 is 3 for, 5 against. There were no abstentions and the amendment is therefore not agreed. I call Amendment 29 in the name of Liam MacArthur, already debated, with Amendment 229. Liam MacArthur, to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 29 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee is agreed. I call Amendment 156 in the name of Brian Whittle, already debated, with Amendment 153. Brian Whittle, to move or not move?
Moved, please.
The question is that Amendment 156 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee is not agreed. Those in favour of Amendment 156? Those against? Abstentions? Thank you. The result of the vote on Amendment 156 is 2 for, 6 against. There were no abstentions and therefore the amendment is not agreed. I call Amendment 157 in the name of Jeremy Balfour, already debated, with Amendment 229. Pam Duncan Glancy, to move or not move?
Move, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 157 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee is not agreed. We'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 157? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 157 is there were no votes for, 8 against, there were no abstentions and the amendment is not agreed. I call Amendment 92 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated, with Amendment 229. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Moved, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 92 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes? No, the committee is not agreed. There will be a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 92? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 92 is there were 6 for, 1 against and 1 abstention. Therefore, the amendment is agreed. I call on Amendment 93 in the name of Jackie Bailey, already debated with Amendment 229. Jackie Bailey, to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 93 is agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Committee is agreed. I call Amendment 158 in the name of Sue Webber, already debated with Amendment 229. Sue Webber, to move or not move?
Moved, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 158 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Committee is not agreed. We'll go to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 158? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 158 is 3 for, 4 against. There was 1 abstention. The amendment is therefore not agreed. I call on Amendment 94 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 229. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Moved, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 94 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee is not agreed. We'll therefore vote. Those in favour of Amendment 94? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 94 is 2 for, 6 against. There were no abstentions. Therefore, the amendment is not agreed. I call Amendment 232 in the name of Stuart McMillan, already debated with Amendment 229. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Moved, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 232 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee is not agreed. Those in favour of Amendment 232? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 232 is 1 for, 7 against. There were no abstentions. Therefore, the amendment is not agreed. I call it Amendment 233 in the name of Fulton McGregor, already debated with Amendment 226. Emma Harper, to move or not move?
I've been instructed to not move, Convener.
Thank you. I call Amendment 95 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 229. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Moved, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 95 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Committee is agreed. I call on Amendment 96 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 229. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Moved, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 96 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Committee is agreed. I call Amendment 97 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 83. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Not moved.
I call Amendment 159 in the name of Jeremy Balfour, already debated with Amendment 229. I remind members that if Amendment 159 is agreed to, I cannot call Amendments 98 or 94 due to preemption. 74, sorry. Pam Duncan-Glancy, to move or not move?
I've been asked to move.
The question is that Amendment 159 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee is not agreed. Those in favour of Amendment 159? Those against? Abstentions? Okay. The result of Amendment 159 is 1 for, 7 against. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. I call Amendment 98 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 229. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Moved, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 98 be agreed to. Are we all agreed?
Yes.
Committee is agreed. I call Amendment 74 in the name of Jackie Bailey, already debated with Amendment 151. Jackie Bailey, to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 74 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee is not agreed. Those in favour of Amendment 74? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 74 is 2 for, 5 against, 1 abstention. The amendment is therefore not agreed. Call Amendment 99 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 229. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Moved, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 99 be agreed to. Are we all agreed?
Yes.
Committee is agreed. I call Amendment 160 in the name of Jeremy Balfour, already debated with Amendment 229. Pam Duncan-Glancy, to move or not move?
Again, I've been asked to move. Thanks.
The question is that Amendment 160 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee is not agreed. There will be a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 160? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 160 is there were no votes for, 8 against, there were no abstentions, therefore the amendment is not agreed. I call Amendment 13 in the name of Emma Harper, already debated with Amendment 220. Emma Harper, to move or not move?
Not move.
I call Amendment 51 in the name of Jackie Bailey, already debated with Amendment 229. Jackie Bailey, to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 51 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee is not agreed. Those in favour of Amendment 51? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 51 is 2 for, 6 against. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. Call Amendment 100 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 226. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Moved, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 100 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee is not agreed. Those in favour of Amendment 100? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 100 is 2 for, 6 against. There were no abstentions and the amendment is therefore not agreed. Call Amendment 101 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 226. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Moved, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 101 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee is not agreed. Those in favour of Amendment 101? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 101 is 2 for, 6 against. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. Call Amendment 102 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 226. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Not moved, Convener.
Not move. Call Amendment 103 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 226. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Not moved.
I call Amendment 234 in the name of Pam Duncan-Glancy, already debated with Amendment 229. Pam Duncan-Glancy, to move or not move?
Move, please, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 234 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee's not agreed. Will therefore move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 234? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 234 is 3 for, 4 against. There is 1 abstention. Therefore, the amendment is not agreed. I call Amendment 235 in the name of Pam Duncan-Glancy, already debated with Amendment 229. Pam Duncan-Glancy, to move or not move?
Move.
The question is that Amendment 235 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee is not agreed. Those in favour of Amendment 235? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 235 was 3 for, 4 against. There was 1 abstention. Therefore, the amendment is not agreed. The question is that Section 7 be agreed. Are we all agreed? I call Amendment 75 in the name of Jackie Bailey, already debated, with Amendment 229. Jackie Bailey, to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 75 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? We'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 75? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 75 is 3 for, 5 against. There were no abstentions, therefore the amendment is not agreed. I call Amendment 161 in the name of Brian Whittle, already debated, with Amendment 220. Brian Whittle, to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 161 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee's not agreed. There will be a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 161? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 161 is 3 for, 5 against. There were no abstentions, therefore the amendment is not agreed. I call Amendment 236 in the name of Pam Duncan-Glancy, already debated, with Amendment 229. Pam Duncan-Glancy, to move or not move?
Not move, Convener.
I call Amendment 104 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated, with Amendment 220. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Not moved, Convener.
I call Amendment 237 in the name of Pam Duncan-Glancy, already debated, with Amendment 220. Pam Duncan-Glancy, to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 237 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee is not agreed. We'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 237? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 237 is 2 for, 6 against. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. Call Amendment 105 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated, with Amendment 220. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Bear with me, Convener. Can you just confirm the amendment number, please, Convener?
105.
105. Moved, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 105 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee is not agreed. Those in favour of Amendment 105? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 105 is 2 for, 6 against. There were no abstentions, and the amendment is therefore not agreed. Call Amendment 238 in the name of Pam Duncan-Glancy, already debated, with Amendment 220. Pam Duncan-Glancy, to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 238 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee's not agreed and we'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 238? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 238 is 2 for, 6 against. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. Call Amendment 162 in the name of Brian Whittle, already debated with Amendment 220. Brian Whittle, to move or not move?
Moved, please.
The question is that Amendment 162 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee is not agreed. We'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 162? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 162 is 3 for, 5 against. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. Call Amendment 5 in the name of Daniel Johnson, already debated with Amendment 229. Daniel Johnson, to move or not move?
Not moved.
I call Amendment 106 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 229. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Moved, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 106 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee is not agreed. We'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 106? Those against? Abstentions?
Sorry, could we run the vote again?
Yes,
Apologies.
we will rerun that vote. Those in favour of Amendment 106? Those against? Abstentions? Okay. Result of the vote on Amendment 106 is 2 for, 6 against. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. The question is that Section 8 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. I call Amendment 107 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 220. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Not moved.
I call Amendment 163 in the name of Brian Whittle, already debated with Amendment 153. Brian Whittle, to move or not move?
Not move.
I call Amendment 108 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 83. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Not moved.
Rhoda Grant has advised she doesn't want to move her amendment.
Okay. So I'm about to call the Amendment 30 in the name of Rhoda Grant, which has already been debated with Amendment 83, but Rhoda Grant has indicated she does not wish to move that amendment. I call Amendment 6 in the name of Daniel Johnson, already debated, with Amendment 229. Daniel Johnson, to move or not move?
Not moved.
Call Amendment 109 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated, with Amendment 229. I remind members that if Amendment 109 is agreed to, I cannot call Amendment 110 due to preemption. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Not moved.
I call Amendment 110 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated, with Amendment 229. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Not moved.
I call Amendment 111 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated, with Amendment 229. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 111 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee is not agreed. We'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 111? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 111 is 3-4-5 against. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. I call Amendment 7 in the name of Daniel Johnson, grouped with Amendments 8 and 9. Daniel Johnson, to move Amendment 7 and to speak to all other amendments in the group.
Thank you very much, Convener. And while I very much appreciate having a group entirely to myself, I actually think in some ways these amendments should be really considered by, with the amendments that were in the previous group. To my mind, I think there are two hugely important elements to this bill. I think, firstly, the judgment being made by medical practitioners as to whether or not an individual actually meets the criteria set out in the bill, in that they are terminally ill and are unable to recover, and therefore, in those circumstances, meet the criteria for assisted dying. But the other really important element is that individuals fully consider the full options available to them. And to that end, I think the 14-day period is doing an awful lot of work. I am not sure whether or not it provides sufficient safeguard. It is an arbitrary time period. It is neither short enough if actually death is really very imminent, nor is it really long enough to provide a genuine period of reflection if an individual's death isn't imminent and they are looking ahead of time. But I won't move these amendments. They are probing. I think it's really just to draw kind of to the committee's attention that actually I think the 14-day period is doing an awful lot of work. I think there do need to be more safeguards to ensure that actually someone is making a clear decision. I think that when someone is facing the end of their life, clearly that is going to be difficult. We, as human beings, often find it difficult to make fully rational judgments. And I do note that the committee has rejected a large number of amendments that would seek to provide additional information. And I do think this is an area that needs to be looked at stage 3 to ensure that people have full information, reflect and make a careful and considered decision. But I won't be moving these amendments at this time.
Mr Johnson, in order for us to have a debate on this section, you have to move the amendment.
Forgive me, convener. I'll move.
Thank you. Liam MacArthur.
Can't give you a grouping on your own if you're not going to play ball, Mr Johnson. Look, can I thank Daniel Johnson for lodging me the amendments, speaking to them, explaining the rationale for them, which I entirely understand. I would accept too the degree of arbitrariness that there is around any sort of time frame that we set for that period of reflection. I think in relation to the point he was making about people whose prognosis may be more imminent, there is a provision in the bill that would allow for anybody assessed to be likely to die within 14 days to have a reflection period of 48 hours, which is not much, but should allow sufficient time for at least some reflection, as well as for the process with all the safeguards to run its course. I do believe at this stage that 14 days strikes the right balance between ensuring the terminally ill adult has time to reflect upon their decision at the end of life, ensuring they're not subject to prolonged suffering, having taken that decision. I'm also aware that in the Stage 1 evidence the committee received, including from the Voluntary Assisted Dying Review Board in Victoria, Australia, which noted that many people seeking assisted death may not live for 14 days, having signed the declaration. I note Amendments 7 and 8 are consequential in Amendment 9. As I say, I understand the rationale for Daniel Johnson lodging these amendments. I think he's almost certainly correct that we will return to this at Stage 3. I think it's going to be difficult for either the committee or Parliament to come up with a time frame that is any less arbitrary, and I think we can draw confidence from what we see in these other jurisdictions that 14 days does by and large seem to be an appropriate time frame to set. But I thank him for lodging the amendments, and will leave my remarks there.
Thank you. Daniel Johnson, to wind up and press
Nothing
forward.
further to add.
Thank you, Mr Johnson. And you're withdrawing Amendment 7?
Withdrawing.
Thank you. Does any member object to Daniel Johnson withdrawing Amendment 7? I call Amendment 112 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 220. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Not moved, Convener.
I call Amendment 113 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 229. I remind members that if Amendment 113 is agreed to, I cannot call Amendment 114. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Not moved.
I call Amendment 114 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 229. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Not moved.
Call Amendment 115 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 229. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Moved, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 115 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Committee is not agreed. Those in favour of Amendment 115? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 115 is 2 for, 6 against. There were no abstentions, and the amendment is therefore not agreed. Can I call Amendment 8? Yes. Yes, okay. So I call Amendment 8 in the name of Daniel Johnson, already debated with Amendment 7. Daniel Johnson, to move or not move? Not moved. The question is that Schedule 2 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. I call Amendment 116 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 229. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 116 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee is not agreed. Those in favour of Amendment 116? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 116 is 2 for, 6 against. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. Call Amendment 117 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 229. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Moved, Convener.
Call Amendment 117A in the name of Bob Doris to... Stuart McMillan. That will be moved by Bob Doris. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
I can confirm I am not Stuart McMillan, but I will nevertheless move this on behalf of Stuart McMillan.
The question is that Amendment 117A be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee is not agreed. Those in favour of Amendment 117A? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 117A is 1 for, 6 against, 1 abstention, and therefore the amendment is not agreed. Bob Doris, to press or withdraw Amendment 117.
Press, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 117 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee is not agreed. We'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 117? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 117 is 2 for, 6 against. There was no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. Call Amendment 239 in the name of Paul Sweeney, already debated with Amendment 229. Paul Sweeney, to move or not move?
Move, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 239 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee is not agreed and we'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 239? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 239 is 1 for, 7 against. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. Call Amendment 240 in the name of Paul Sweeney, already debated with Amendment 229. Paul Sweeney, to move or not move?
Move, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 240 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee is not agreed. Those in favour of Amendment 240? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 240 is 2 for, 6 against. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. Call Amendment 9 in the name of Daniel Johnson, already debated with Amendment 7. Daniel Johnson, to move or not move?
Not moved.
The question is that Section 9 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Call Amendment 241 in the name of Paul Sweeney, already debated with Amendment 229. Paul Sweeney, to move or not move?
Move, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 241 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee is not agreed. We'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 241? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 241 is 1 for, 7 against. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. Call Amendment 164 in the name of Brian Whittle, already debated with Amendment 220. Brian Whittle, to move or not move?
Moved, please.
Move. Thank you. The question is that Amendment 164 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee's not agreed. We will move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 164? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 164 is 3 for, 5 against. There were no abstentions. Therefore, the amendment is not agreed. So we move to Amendment 165 in the name of Murdo Fraser, which was already debated with Amendment 149. Mr Fraser is not here and has given no indication that anyone else was to move his amendments. So therefore Amendments 165, 166 and 167 are therefore not moved. The question is that Section 10 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Call Amendment 118 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 220. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Not moved.
Call Amendment 3 in the name of Sandish Gohani, already debated with Amendment 83. I remind members that Amendments 3 and 168 are direct alternatives. The text of whichever is the last agreed to is what will appear in the bill. Brian Whittle, to move on behalf of Sandish Gohani or not move?
Move, please.
The question is that Amendment 3 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. No. Committee's not agreed. We therefore move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 3? Those against? And abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 3 is 7 for. There were none against. And there is 1 abstention. The amendment is therefore agreed.
So Claire Baker, same as murder. She's not indicated.
Okay. So I was about to call Amendment 168 in the name of Claire Baker, already debated with Amendment 83. Claire Baker is not present. Are you? I have had no indication that anyone else was moving her amendments, Miss Duncan Glancy. Are you moving her amendments?
She's asked me to say not moved, if that's helpful.
That's very helpful. So that's in relation to Amendment 168. It's not moved. I call Amendment 119 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 83. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Not moved.
Can I check with you, Ms Duncan Glancy, if you are moving or not moving the amendments in the name of Rhoda Grant?
I haven't been asked,
Okay.
but I haven't been given instruction.
So,
Sorry, Rhoda Grant had indicated she's not intending to move from amendments.
okay.
Yep.
So I was about to call Amendment 31 in the name of Rhoda Grant, already debated with Amendment 83, but clerks have informed me that Ms Grant has informed them she does not intend to move that amendment. I call Amendment 120 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 220. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Not moved, Convener.
The question is that Schedule 3 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? And at that point, I'm going to suspend committee for 10 minutes for a brief comfort break. I call Amendment 121 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 229. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
I wouldn't like to say I was caught out there, Convener. Could you please give me the number of that amendment again? And if you give me it slowly, I'll go to the correct bit in my notes. I'm now at the right bit in my notes.
Call Amendment 121 in your name, Mr Doris,
So
to move or not move.
So as keen as I am to move that, I am not going to move it this morning.
I call Amendment 169 in the name of Brian Whittle, already debated with Amendment 220. Brian Whittle, to move or not move?
Move, please.
The question is that Amendment 169 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee's not agreed. We'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 169? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 169 is 2 for, 6 against. There were no abstentions and the amendment is therefore not agreed. The question is that Section 11 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Call Amendment 32 in the name of Liam MacArthur, already debated with Amendment 149. I remind members that if Amendment 32 is agreed to, I cannot call Amendment 170. Liam MacArthur, to move or not move?
Move, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 32 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Committee is agreed. The question is that Section 12 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The question is that Schedule 5 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Call Amendment 171 in the name of Murdo Fraser, already debated with Amendment 149. As Mr Fraser is not here and has not indicated anyone else will move the amendment. The amendment is therefore not moved. I call Amendment 172 in the name of Brian Whittle, already debated with Amendment 220. Brian Whittle, to move or not move?
Move, please.
The question is that Amendment 172 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee is not agreed. We'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 172? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 172 is 2 for, 6 against. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. Call Amendment 122 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 229. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Not moved.
Call Amendment 123 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 229. Bob Doris, to move or not move?
Not moved, Convener.
The question is that Section 13 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The question is that Section 14 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. I call Amendment 242 in the name of Ross Greer, grouped with Amendments 243, 274, 279 and 283. Patrick Harvey, to move amendments on Ross Greer's behalf, to move Amendment 242 and to speak to all amendments in the group.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you for the flexibility to allow me to speak on behalf of Ross Greer, who has lost his voice, which makes it very tempting for me to abuse the privilege. But just to be clear, I'm simply going to read a statement that Ross has given me. So references in the first person should be taken as referring to Ross Greer. As mentioned at stage 1, I have two primary areas of concern with the bill. The first is in regards to the proposal for a dispersed rather than specialist service, which my amendments in regard to training in a later group are intended to address. This group of amendments are intended to address in part my other concern, the risk of coercion and undue influence on someone considering making the choice to end their own life. To summarise the amendments in this group, 242 creates the right to access independent advocacy for those considering requesting assistance under the Act. 243 requires the provider of independent advocacy services to comply with minimum standards set by ministers and regulations. 274 sets that those regulations should be subject to the affirmative procedure. 279 sets out the provisions on the right to advocacy and advocacy service standards commence on the day after royal assent, and 283 sets out the substantive provisions of assisted dying services cannot commence before the minimum advocacy standards are set. The key amendment here is 242, creating the right for those engaging with the assisted dying system to high-quality, independent, rights-focused advocacy. A neutral third party would be able to support a person through a potentially complex system and put their interests first. This right mirrors other statutory provisions for an independent advocacy, for example, in the Social Security Act 2018. As with the 2018 Act, which I drew on for drafting purposes, this advocacy is optional and intended for those who would benefit from an advocate's support to ensure they can make this choice with all the relevant information available to them, and with the safeguard of someone whose only role in the process is to represent their interests and help them navigate the system. I'm envisaging that the advocate would be not known to the person already, and that they would otherwise not be involved in the person's care. They would be able to advocate for a person from the point they are first contemplating assisted dying until the point of their death, should that be the choice they ultimately make. The advocate would, among other services, support the person to navigate the system, ensure that the person's rights are respected, and act as a safeguard against coercion or other forms of undue influence. The intention of this amendment is to embed a patient's rights throughout their interaction with the assisted dying process. Recognising in particular the potential increased risk to a patient's right from a dispersed rather than centralised service delivery model, the advocate is intended to protect against potential infringements of a patient's rights and to identify and intervene in cases of potential coercion, pressure or undue influence. I would like to thank Dr Sandra Lucas and Dr Rona Whittington from the School of Health and Life Sciences at the University of West of Scotland for their support with these amendments. Their Stage 1 briefing helped shape my thinking ahead of that debate, and these amendments stem from that briefing and the subsequent discussions I've had with them. They've both have invaluable experience from assisted dying systems in Australia and New Zealand. My advocacy amendments reflect the voluntary assisted dying statewide care navigator service system operated in Victoria, Australia. Research, including the Ben White report in the Medical Journal of Australia, which was a qualitative study into the Victoria scheme, has called the advocate or navigator the jewel in the crown of that scheme, facilitating crucial discussions with compassion and giving people the confidence and knowledge to assert their rights. If Parliament passes this bill, I want people here who access or are considering accessing the system to have that same confidence and knowledge of their rights. Other jurisdictions adopting assisted dying have also included navigator or advocacy schemes, such as the Queensland Voluntary Assisted Dying Support Service. While the Victoria model is staffed by trained allied health professionals, the Queensland scheme opens it to social workers, psychologists and lawyers as well. I can see the advantage of this role being fulfilled either by medical professionals or by those with a degree of separation from the health service entirely, thus my amendments not specifying either way. I think that could reasonably be up to ministers to set out via regulations, though I would be happy to look at revisions ahead of Stage 3 to clarify some details about the advocacy scheme if there was a feeling from colleagues that further detail on the face of the bill itself was required. I'm grateful to various stakeholders for their support in these amendments. The EHRC's briefing for Stage 2 supports including a statutory right to access independent advocacy. I'm aware the BMA has welcomed debate on the issue of advocacy at Stage 2. I should clarify that the intention is that everyone contemplating or undergoing assisted dying would be entitled to advocacy akin to the care navigator in other jurisdictions. My clause 2423B is intended to capture that anyone who would benefit from advocacy is entitled to it. The intention is not to replace the role of assessing doctors in spotting coercion. The advocates would complement this, providing an additional safeguard. This goes to the heart of my concern about putting the burden of spotting something as complex and contestable as coercion onto the doctor under a dispersed model. To me, that feels too much like risking a single point of failure in the system. Part of the training I would envisage for the mandatory service standards would be identifying coercion, spotting warning signs of undue influence. Nearly finished, Convener. On interaction between advocacy and a potential information service, my intention is for advocates to take on the role similar to Victoria and Queensland navigators, more than just being a source of information and signposting, but also a source of more fulsome support and safeguarding, particularly in terms of emotional support for patients and, importantly, their families. I would be happy to work with the BMA and other interested stakeholders and members ahead of Stage 3 to add further details if they believe that is necessary. I certainly don't oppose provisions for an information service as proposed by others, but I do not think that is enough. If we're providing independent advocacy for those accessing social security, care experienced young people and others, we should provide it for those considering making a decision as significant as this. And I move Amendment 242.
Thank you, Mr Harvey. Liam MacArthur.
Thank you. Can I thank Patrick Harvey for setting out the rationale for these amendments? Can I also wish Ross Greer a speedy recovery? I think he's got a few debates he's lined up to speak in this week as well. I think it's fair to say I'm fully supportive of being available to help people understand and navigate the process. It's why the bill allows ministers to make guidance under Section 23 on matters relevant to the bill. It's also why I've lodged an amendment to strengthen that provision, requiring ministers to provide or ensure the provision of information about the process in an accessible and understandable format for the benefit certainly of terminally ill adults, but the medical, social care and social work professionals as well as the wider public. I'm aware also that there are existing structures to ensure patient safety and supported decision-making. Health boards in Scotland must observe equal opportunity requirements, and while not strictly advocacy, the Patient Advice and Support Service does provide support to patients, while the GMC provides guidance to doctors on supporting patients in their decision-making. Under my bill, proxy arrangements can be made to support a person in accessing assisted dying services, and the Patient Safety Commissioner will have a role to play as well. I'm aware, though, through my own engagement with third sector organisations, that many stand ready to help provide assistance and navigation advice and support through a navigation service. That would be my hope, and what we have seen, as Patrick Harvey rightly said, in other jurisdictions that have assisted dying legislation in place. As with some other amendments, the Scottish Government may be perhaps best placed to comment on how this provision would fit with existing structures, policies and services. In terms of Amendment 283, my bill provides for Scottish ministers to commence the substantive parts of the bill by regulation. This reflects that ministers are responsible for ensuring all aspects of the assisted dying service are workable and tie in with all other aspects of health and public service delivery in an integrated and safe way. Scottish ministers will have the necessary oversight, and I expect them to commence the various substantive parts of the Act only when all relevant health, social care, social work and other services are appropriately prepared and all necessary measures in place to enable assistance to be requested and provided. Singling out in statute particular steps that must happen before the Act can be commenced risks undermining this process and further potentially delaying the availability of assistance to those that need it. I note the Scottish Government has highlighted that it's unclear from the amendments whether the conditions have to be met by the individual advocate or by the service provider, and how the service would be funded or monitored. That said, I am very sympathetic to what Ross Greer is seeking to achieve through these amendments. I am very happy to speak with him once his voice returns and ahead of Stage 3 to see what more can be provided through the bill to address the concerns that he rightly raises. At this stage, I would perhaps urge him through Patrick Harvey not to press the amendments But I'm, as I say, very pleased that the committee has at least had an opportunity to engage with this issue, which, as I say, reflects what we see in other jurisdictions. It's a balance as to whether you put this in statute or you allow the provision to develop organically, which again has been the experience in many of those jurisdictions.
Thank you, Mr MacArthur. Patrick Harvey to wind up and place a withdrawal, Amendment 242.
Can I thank Liam MacArthur for the broadly constructive and positive comments that he's made. I'm aware that Ross Greer is keen that Amendment 242 is pressed to the vote, so I'll do that. But I'll just note as well that if the committee wasn't minded to support this, I think there is an intention to work constructively before stage 2 if the amendments in this group don't pass. But for the time being, I press Amendment 242.
Mr Harvey. The question is that Amendment 242 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Committee is agreed. I call Amendment 243 in the name of Ross Greer. Already debated with Amendment 242. Patrick Harvey to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 243 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Committee is agreed. I call Amendment 173 in the name of Brian Whittle, grouped with amendments as shown in the groupings. I point out that if Amendment 180 is agreed to, I cannot call Amendment 33 due to preemption. Brian Whittle to move Amendment 173 and to speak to all amendments in the group.
Thank you, Convener. What I'm trying to do here at 178, 180, the concern is around the liability of medical professionals in the event that something doesn't go to plan. And if they're not in the room, they are not immediately aware of any adverse reaction should it occur. What it does, in essence, 178 and 180, is ensure that the medical professional providing the substance must remain in the same room as the patient. 185, 177, 173, 175. In speaking to these, it's been my approach as a committee member to take a neutral stance on the ethical and moral issues around assisted dying and focus instead on ensuring the legislation is as good as it could be. In line with that, I have evaluated approaches made to me by organisations looking for someone to lodge amendments on their behalf and where I believe it would improve the legislation. With that, there are clearly some gaps for the pharmacy profession, and I hope we can address these, if not here, then at stage 3. The concern here is the bill, as it's written, isn't clear on the role of pharmacists in the process of assisted dying with respect to their scope of practice, which could also risk devaluing the skills of the pharmacist. 185 makes provision for registered pharmacists to undertake the role of the authorised health professional, which clarifies the role of the pharmacist in the process and allows them the clear option to use the conscientious objection clause. 177 limits the role of the pharmacist within their scope of practice, but not expecting them to make decisions on competency of the individual. 173 clarifies that a pharmacist should supply the substance to the registered medical practitioner or authorised healthcare professional, and also allows the option to use the conscientious objection clause. And 175 limits the role of the pharmacist within their scope of practice when acting as an authorised health professional to 1, providing a terminally ill adult with the approved substance, and 2, to remove the substance from the premises at which it was provided. And with that, I move Amendment 173. Convener.
Thank you, Mr Whittle. Minnie McNair to speak to Amendment 244 and other amendments in the group.
Thank you, Convener, and I appreciate you calling me early on in this group and enabled me to get back to my own committee. My amendment 244 goes to the heart of the wider debate about assisted dying. Those in favour of this bill have consistently said it is about allowing someone to end their own life, not about another person ending it for them. Yet, as drafted, the bill does not clearly rule out that possibility. There is no clear prohibition on another person administering the life-ending substance on behalf of the patient, and that omission matters, because if another person can administer it, then what we're talking about is not assisted dying, but euthanasia. And that is a very different moral and legal act If Parliament allows that ambiguity to remain, we risk crossing a boundary that even many supporters of assisted dying do not wish to cross. My amendment brings clarity. It strengthens Section 15 to make it explicit that the substance must be self-administered by the terminally ill adult and no one else may do so on their behalf. It preserves the distinction between assisted dying and euthanasia, a distinction that supporters of the bill themselves believe is fundamental. It ensures that this remains in law and in practice an act of personal agency rather than the taking of life by another. Proponents of assisted dying say they oppose the euthanasia. If that is truly the case, then they should have no hesitation in supporting this amendment. I move Amendment 244.
Thank you, Ms McNair. Jackie Bailey to speak to Amendment 76 and other amendments in the group.
Thank you very much, Convener. I've lodged Amendments 76, 77, 78 and 79 on behalf of the Royal College of Nursing Scotland. RCN Scotland, as you know, maintains a neutral stance on assisted dying, but has serious concerns about Section 15, specifically the expectation that registered nurses acting as authorised health professionals carry out complex assessments of capacity and coercion and the possibility of nurses providing assistance while working alone. Amendment 77 proposes that final assessments of capacity and coercion be carried out by a doctor. These are complex clinical judgments, especially when time has passed since perhaps there have been earlier assessments and factors like pain or medication may affect cognition. It could have been months since the coordinating and independent doctors undertook the assessments to determine eligibility, and capacity can fluctuate in a person who is terminally ill. Similarly, identifying coercion is inherently difficult, particularly without a structured framework. So while some nurses in advanced practice roles have relevant expertise, the bill is structured in a way that means these specialists are unlikely to be the ones asked to act as authorised health professionals. Instead, nurses in more general settings, such as community care, GP practices or hospital wards, may be expected to take on this role infrequently. RCN Scotland believes that assessing capacity in this context requires a depth of knowledge and experience that goes beyond the scope of practice of most registered nurses. This amendment would ensure that these final assessments are undertaken by either the coordinating doctor or another authorised doctor, which the RCN believes is safer and more appropriate. Amendments 76, 78 and 79 address the RCN's serious concerns about lone working. The bill, as it currently stands, allows nurses to provide the approved substance alone, which RCN Scotland considers unsafe. Providing assistance will take place in a highly sensitive and emotionally charged environment where complex family dynamics may arise. Nurses may then face distressed families, individuals who are unable to self-administer and therefore cannot receive assistance, or unexpected reactions to the substance. Current practice for controlled drugs typically requires 2 registered nurses to prepare and administer. This safeguard should apply here too. These amendments would require a nurse acting as authorised health professional to be accompanied by another health professional. In practical terms, that would mean a doctor would carry out the final assessments on capacity and coercion, and either they or a nurse accompanied by that doctor would then provide the substance. Where a nurse provides the substance, either the accompanying doctor remains present or the doctor then leaves and another health professional arrives to accompany the nurse while the person decides whether to use the substance, and if so, has subsequently died. While the bill allows a nurse to be accompanied, it doesn't require it. So it leaves it up to individual nurses to advocate for themselves when they're asked to attend alone, and we don't regard that as acceptable. RCN Scotland believes these amendments introduce essential safeguards and must be incorporated into the bill. I move.
Thank you, Ms Bailey. Sue Beber to speak to Amendment 176 and other amendments in the group.
Thank you, Convener. I have Amendments 176, 181, 182 and 183 in this grouping. I'll start with 176, and my remarks may sound similar from last week's because this amendment within Section 15 is there to address the serious moral and medical flaws in this bill in that it's the presumption that the substances used in assisted suicide will always deliver a swift and painless death. Indeed, we've just heard from Jackie Bailey regarding the Royal College of Nurses that they acknowledge that there can be unexpected reactions to these substances. So we have to recognise that, because experience from other countries have shown that these substances can have severe side effects. And in places where assisted suicide is legal, there have been reports of vomiting, choking, fluid in the lungs, prolonged pain, and even cases where the person did not die as expected. This is not a swift and painless death. But as the bill is drafted, it doesn't require that individuals be informed of these risks before making their decision. And I believe that individuals must be fully informed and fully aware of what may or may not happen. The Section 16 deals with that end-of-life process and sets out how a person will be provided with that assistance to lawfully end their own life, and it's for that person to decide, after completing the second round declaration, if, when and where they wish to be given an approved substance. And I believe that they need to be fully aware of every risk and every side effect that may occur. And the omission of that undermines one of the core principles that this Parliament should uphold, and I reiterate this again: it is informed consent. And my Amendment 176 would correct that by requiring the practitioner to inform the adult of any potential side effects or complications, including the risk of pain, and to be satisfied that the adult has understood that as well. It ensures that people are not simply given a choice, but an honest choice. And it's not about endorsing assisted suicide, it's about recognising the reality that if Parliament passes the bill, we've got a duty to minimise harm and prevent unnecessary suffering, because we can't allow people to take these substances without having that full consent and knowledge of what these substances can do to them. Now I'm going to move on to Amendment 181 and 182, which discusses when the substances don't work. These amendments address what will maybe be the most chilling silence in this entire bill of what happens when the substances don't work. Nowhere does the bill explain what a doctor or nurse should do if the person remains alive after taking the lethal dose. That absence is not accidental. It flows from a dangerous presumption that the substance will always work, that death will always follow, and that complications will never arise. Again, yes, Mr Whittle.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms Weber. I'm listening with intent here, and it kind of brings me back to amendments earlier that didn't pass when I was trying to get the committee to pass advanced care directives, which actually should address the exact point you make and what the patient's request is. Should something go wrong, and I think that's the same thing as this idea that nothing will ever go wrong. We need an advanced care directive. I wonder if that's something you would agree with and should be brought back at stage 3.
Mr Whittle, I agree. Every possible safeguard should be included in this bill, and I've sat today and last week and watched safeguard after safeguard be turned down, and I am gravely concerned with the direction that this bill is taking. Experience overseas shows that it's not true. That countries where assisted suicide has been legalised, there are documented cases where death has not occurred, where people have awoken hours later or lingered in distress. When we can legislate for death, we must also legislate for when death does not come. And not doing so is of great concern to me. My Amendment 181 sets out a clear and humane procedure for such cases. I hate talking about these sorts of things in such a pragmatic, emotionless state, but I think my amendment will require that a medical professional takes all reasonable steps to preserve life, including, where possible, reversing the effects of the substance, unless the adult at that time and with capacity refuses such an intervention. Second, it requires that the entire incident be recorded in writing, including details of the substance used and the sequence of events. Amendment 182 makes it explicit that any person who administers further substances to bring about death after the initial attempt has failed would be subject to the existing criminal law on homicide. And this is not a theoretical concern, it's a moral one. When the state authorises the taking of a life, it must also face the consequences when that act fails. Because if we are to cross that line as a Parliament, then we must at least ensure that when death does not occur, life is protected, suffering is not compounded, and that the law does not turn its face away. My amendments 181 and 182 are frankly about confronting the reality and preserving what little humanity we can in a bill that risks abandoning it. Finally, I'm going to move to Amendment 183, and I've spoken briefly about this. It's about recording of any complications after taking the substances, because this amendment speaks to the uncomfortable gap between how this bill imagines assisted suicide will work and how it has worked in practice elsewhere. This bill proceeds on the assumption that the substances used to end life will do so cleanly, peacefully and without complication, but that assumption is false. The evidence from overseas tells a very different story, and countries where assisted suicide has been legalised, there have been cases of vomiting, choking, fluid filling the lungs, and in some instances the substance simply failing to end the life at all. Yet despite these realities, this bill provides no mechanism to record or report when such complications occur. This is a frankly extraordinary omission. If this Parliament is to sanction the deliberate ending of life, then at the very least it must ensure that the methods used are subject to proper scrutiny and improvement. Every other medical procedure undergoes this. This amendment would do precisely that, and it would require that a medical professional record any complications, adverse reactions or unintended effects arising from the administration of this approved substance in the adult's medical records, and an anonymised report be submitted to Public Health Scotland. This is an attempt to limit the harm it may cause. Because if Parliament insists on creating a system for assisted suicide, it has a moral duty to ensure that this process is safe, transparent and as humane as possible. Turning a blind eye to complications is not compassion, it's indifference. And I want to confront the reality and not idealise it. I move the amendments. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Ms Webber. Daniel Johnson to speak to Amendment 10 and other amendments in the group.
Thank you, Convener. Can I begin just in this section by stating that I very much support the amendments being moved by Jackie Bailey with support of the Royal College of Nursing. I think one of the particular points in this section is I think we must have clarity about the roles. The act of the final provision of the substance and the act itself, I think, are particularly sensitive. And I think it's really important that we have clarity of the role around the registered medical practitioner, but also other medical professionals, and also in what combination those take place. So both in terms of the role of nurses, but also actually that point about accompaniment and supervision, I think are very important. In terms of my amendments, I voted for the bill at stage one on the point of the principle that people should have bodily autonomy, and this being very much about people whose death is imminent, but also enabling them to make the final decision and final act. And that last point is very important to me, which is why I've brought forward this amendment. And while I note that the intent of the legislation is drafted and indeed the policy memorandum, I'm concerned in this section there isn't sufficient clarity that the final act will be that of the individual. And what my amendment seeks to do is specify that, very much for similar reasons as Marie McNair pointed out. Throughout the discussion of this, great care has been taken about the language, about whether or not this is assisted dying, assisted suicide, and actually very much rejecting any notion that this could be viewed as euthanasia. And I understand that. These are important distinctions. It's important, to my mind, that this is about enabling someone to take an act for themselves and to themselves. It cannot be enabling an act of one person administering to another. There is a big difference, in my mind, to enabling someone ending their life and enabling others to end others' lives. You know, one is about enabling one's own death. The other is quite simply, as a matter of moral distinction, is is killing another person. And I use that word advisedly because I think there is an important moral distinction. I think it is easy in these settings to highlight the complexity and say that in practical terms there is not necessarily those distinctions. But I actually think these moral differences are important. I think I also think in those practical terms, it is essential that an individual has the ability to withdraw their consent to ending their own life up until that very final moment, which is why self-administration is so important. So what my amendments do is seek to clarify this, because I think there are also sensitivities in terms of the person's physical capacity to undertake this. So it specifies that the Act will be that for the individual, specifying that they must the substances are prepared by use of the adult, that it also may enable the preparation of a device, and that there may be assistance towards final ingestion of the substance by the individual. But it also further clarifies that those points notwithstanding, that final decision must be that of the individual themselves, and further that the coordinating registered medical practitioner, it may not administer directly the substance to the individual. And I think these are really important clarifications to state very clearly and specifically what it is that this bill would authorise. Because I think, as I state, it's important that we have that moral clarity, a moral distinction, but ultimately it is this point, and it is vital that it is ultimately the individual's choice and that they can withdraw that consent right up until that very final moment. And that's the reason I brought forward that amendment this morning.
Thank you, Mr Johnson. Douglas Ross to speak to Amendment 179 and other amendments in the group, as well as Stephen Kerr's Amendment 126.
Thank you very much, Convener. My reason for lodging Amendment 179 is to highlight and address one of the most disturbing assumptions at the heart of this bill that has been articulated by other members lodging amendments in this group. The belief that every death will be swift, smooth and certain. They will not. We know that from international experience from countries such as Canada and Netherlands, as other members have said. These countries where assisted dying is legal have seen cases where substance fails to bring about the death as expected, people regaining consciousness, people suffering for hours, people enduring distressing complications such as choking, vomiting or prolonged pain. I don't believe anyone who supports this bill wants to see that, but it is the reality. Also, under this bill, no medical professional would be required to remain in the room when the substance is taken. So if the death does not occur, the person would be left alone, frightened, vulnerable and in pain, with no qualified person to intervene. So my amendment would seek to address that. It would require a medical professional to remain present until the death occurs or until it is clear that the substance had failed to take effect. Even to those who support assisted dying, this is surely the bare minimum of decency. If Parliament is to sanction the deliberate ending of a life, it must take responsibility for what happens if that process fails. Now, I don't support this bill. I oppose it in principle. I believe it places unbearable moral and practical burdens on individuals, families and our health service. But if it is to proceed, it cannot do so under the false comfort that every death will be peaceful, because we know they will not. This amendment is about facing the truth, that death may not come, that suffering may follow, and that the state has a duty not to look away. And for these reasons, I encourage members to support my amendment in this group. Can I also, Convener, as you alluded to, speak to the amendments 126 and 188 in the name of my colleague, Stephen Kerr, who apologises for not being able to be here today. I am reading out his words, so bear with me if you will. These amendments address a critical gap in this bill, the absence of any statutory requirement to record and report what actually happens when an assisted death takes place. At present, the bill assumes that every death will proceed as planned, swiftly and without complication. But that assumption doesn't align with the evidence we've seen from areas where assisted dying has been legal for some time, in particular Canada and the Netherlands. There, we have seen documented instances of complications during administration, delays before death occurred, unexpected physical reactions and distress both for those dying and the professionals present. If Scotland is to legislate in this profoundly serious area, we must do so with our eyes opened, guided by evidence and what has been seen elsewhere. Amendment 126 therefore ensures that the final statement required under Schedule 4 records two specific pieces of information. First, the time that elapsed between the administration of the approved substance and death, and second, any complications occurred and observed during the procedure. That information should not sit in a drawer. So Amendment 188 complements 126 by requiring that the information be included in the annual report prepared under Section 26 of the Bill. In other words, Parliament and the public should be able to see transparently, year by year, what has actually occurred under this legislation. The Stage 1 report of the Health, Social Care and Sport Committee acknowledged the issues of information reporting and review, and that they may require strengthening at Stage 2 to ensure appropriate detail and transparency. The amendments from Stephen Kerr directly meet that recommendation. They do not challenge the principle of the bill, but they insist that if Parliament chooses to legislate for assisted dying, it must also commit to rigorous, honest monitoring of the real-world outcomes. This is not a partisan matter, it's about integrity in lawmaking. If this bill is to command public trust, it must be built on full disclosure and a willingness to learn from experience. Transparency is the foundation of public confidence. Recording what happens at the point of death is not morbid bureaucracy. It is an essential safeguard that ensures that law operates safely, humanely and truthfully. If this legislation is passed, it will touch on the most sensitive boundary of human life and medical ethics. It must therefore be governed by truth, not by assumption, by evidence, not by expectation. For these reasons, I and Stephen Kerr urge members to support Amendments 126 and 188, modest, reasonable and necessary proposals that will strengthen accountability, uphold honesty and protect the integrity of our law. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Mr Ross. Liam MacArthur to speak to Amendment 33 and other amendments in the group.
Thank you, Convener. Can I start by expressing the hope that Stephen Kerr hasn't gone the same way as Ross Greer and lost his voice as well. But can I thank Brian Whittle and the other members who have had an opportunity to set out the rationale for their amendments in this grouping. Look forward to hearing the comments from others who have amendments in the group. Can I also apologise at the outset, Convener, for perhaps observing your plea at the outset to be brief. I only have one amendment in this group, but I'm conscious there are many amendments and many members who've lodged amendments. So I will be probably lengthy in my remarks, but I will do my best to recoup some of that time in later groupings. I'll start with my own amendment. But it's probably worth also acknowledging at the outset that all the amendments in this group relate to Section 15 and the provision of the use of an approved substance. And I think I'd remind members again that all provisions of the bill must be within the competence of the Parliament. I'm aware the Scottish Government is working with the UK Government to ensure the full operation of the bill should it be passed. The Scottish Government will be considering many of the amendments in this group in the context of those discussions, and we certainly urge the Cabinet Secretary to keep this committee and other members updated. Turning to my Amendment 33, it requires the coordinating registered medical practitioner or authorised health professional that attends on the day that the person intends to take the authorised substance and who will provide the substance to the person to stay with the person in the same room until the substance has been used. As introduced, the bill states that the attending coordinating registered medical practitioner or authorised health professional must be on the premises but need not be in the same room as the person while they decide whether to be provided with and use the substance. Where the person has chosen to use the substance, the coordinating medical professional or authorised health professional must stay on the premises until the substance has been used and the person has died. Amendment 33 responds to questions that were raised by Police Scotland that were echoed by Douglas Ross and I think Brian Whittle, and by amending section 15.6 of the bill to the effect that the attending coordinating medical practitioner or authorised health professional must remain with the person in the same room until such time that the person has decided to take the substance and has taken that substance. As before, it will then be at the discretion of the attending medical professional as to whether they remain in the room after that point or elsewhere on the premises. This is intended to address any potential concerns as to whether the substance has been self-administered. I note Amendments 178, 180 and 179 offer alternate approaches on the same issue, and I thank Brian Whittle and Douglas Ross for lodging them and allowing this debate to take place. Brian Whittle's Amendments 178 and 180 seek to ensure that the coordinating registered medical practitioner or authorised health professional remain in the same room as the terminally ill person throughout. In addition to what I said in speaking to Amendment 33, I believe it is important that after the substance has been taken, the terminally ill adult and any attending loved ones be afforded some privacy if they wish it, while having the attending health professional close at hand. Regarding Amendment 179, Section 15.5 sets out that the coordinating registered medical practitioner or authorised health professional must remain with the adult until the adult has decided whether to use the substance, and if they do, until they've died. Amendment 179 adds to that by requiring the coordinating registered medical practitioner or authorised health professional to remain with the person until they have died or that the attending health professional has determined that the substance has failed to take effect. I certainly understand what Mr Whittle and Mr Ross are seeking to achieve, motivated by a concern I fully recognise. But I believe Amendment 33 deals with the issue more proportionately, allowing privacy for a terminally ill adult where necessary and appropriate. Turning to... certainly.
I understand Lee MacArthur's desire for privacy, but does he also accept the international experience where people have not died as a result of the substance or have suffered significant complications, and even with the person being in the same building, they are not in the same room, and a medical professional can provide privacy by standing well back, but being there, present in the room, able to intervene if required?
Can I thank Douglas Ross for that intervention? I think in terms of the efficacy of the substance, I think the committee heard at stage one from witnesses in Australia who I think went some way to allay many of those concerns. But I certainly appreciate there will be instances where complications may arise. I think it's why it's important that the medical professional remain present on the premises. I think there will be a discussion ahead of the self-administration of the substance about what is expected to happen. But we do see in other jurisdictions instances where the provision of the medication is not in person by a medical professional. Concerns do not appear to arise as a result of that. So I think there's an additional safeguard in relation to my bill that doesn't exist in other jurisdictions. And I think the fact that they are there and available allows us to balance the need between making sure that there is no coercion or undue influence being brought to bear, that the self-administration does take place, but where the individual and perhaps members of their family do wish additional privacy, that can be respected, again, while maintaining, I think, the robustness of this safeguard. Yeah, briefly.
Just sort of an addendum to Douglas Ross's point there. There is another concern here that you maybe my concern is you haven't considered, and that is the liability of the medical professional if he leaves the room. And I just wonder if Mr MacArthur has considered. We talk about other jurisdictions, but our laws and legal process are different, and have they been considered around the protection of our medical professionals and liability if something goes wrong?
Look, I think that's a very fair point to raise. It's not been one that's raised with me in the context either of the way the bill was introduced or in relation to the additional safeguard that I'm seeking to introduce through Amendment 33. Again, I'm very prepared to engage with other members and indeed representatives of the profession to see if there's any anxieties there that still need to be addressed. But as I say, the safeguards here, notwithstanding the point Mr Whittle rightly makes about our own legal setup in Scotland. I believe that the safeguard is appropriate and, as I say, balances the need to ensure self-administration, no evidence of coercion, but also respects the right of an individual to have the privacy that they may wish at the end of life. Turning to amendments relating to the role of the pharmacist in section 15 and the provision of the substance, again lodged by Brian Whittle, I remind members that section 15 details that the coordinating registered medical practitioner or an authorised health professional can provide the approved substance if specified conditions are met. Amendment 173 provides that the approved substance can only be supplied to the coordinating registered medical practitioner or authorised health professional for that purpose by a registered pharmacist in accordance with the directions of the coordinating registered medical practitioner. This amendment on its own is one I can support on the understanding it would not add to the competence issues being considered by Scottish and UK governments. Amendment 177 enables the coordinating registered medical practitioner or authorised health professional, where they are accompanied by any other health professional, which could be a registered medical practitioner, a registered nurse or a registered pharmacist, as per section 29, to delegate their functions under sections 1 and 7 of section 15 to that person. Subsection 1 deals with the provision of the approved substance, and subsection 7 deals with the removal of the substance where the terminally ill adult decides against using it. However, Amendment 175, which I understand should be read with Amendment 177, requires that the coordinating doctor or authorised health professional, as the case may be, has to be present for the provision of the substance. Mr Whittle's intention here, I believe, is that it be the role of a pharmacist to provide the substance to the person. However, I believe there's merit in retaining the provision that it is for the coordinating registered medical practitioner or authorised health professional to provide the substance. I envisage the role of any other health professional attending at the discretion of the coordinating registered medical practitioner or authorised health professional to be limited to providing assistance to the CRMP or AHP sees fit. I'm wary of allowing functions under Section 15 to be delegated by the CRMP or AHP, who must be in attendance and who will have the relevant skills, training, experience and qualifications to fulfil the functions set out in subsections 1 and 7 of Section 15 regarding the provision or disposal of the substance. Amendment 185 adds registered pharmacists to the definition of authorised health professional in Section 15. I note the Government suggests that in order to fulfil this role, pharmacists would likely need additional training over and above that required by the doctors and registered nurses fulfilling this role. I agree with this assessment and would also note that if this amendment were agreed to, there would be no distinction between who can be an authorised health professional in Section 15.8 and a health professional as defined in Section 29, potentially leading to confusion. Turning to Jackie Bailey's Amendments 76 to 79, which would require that where the substance is to be provided by an authorised health professional who is a registered nurse, they must be accompanied by the coordinating registered medical practitioner or another AHP who is a registered medical practitioner. It would be for the CRMP or AHP, who is a registered medical professional, to make the determinations on a person's capacity and whether they were being coerced. The registered nurse would have to be accompanied by another health professional for the purposes of subsections 5 to 7. The bill provides for the role of an authorised health professional to ensure there is no unreasonable delay or barrier to a person who is eligible being provided with assistance. Limiting the Section 15 role for a registered nurse in the way suggested may lead to such delays and a loss of access for some terminally ill adults. The bill requires that the authorised health professional to be a registered medical practitioner or registered nurse authorised by the coordinating RMP. The coordinating RMP, therefore, already has a key role in deciding whether to appoint an authorised health professional. Having engaged with the RCN, I've lodged amendments requiring Scottish ministers to be able to regulate for any training, qualifications and experience a registered medical practitioner or registered nurse should have in order to carry out the role of AHP. I believe if passed, the amendments will help ensure the role will be suitably supported. I should also note that the amendments I've brought forward in section 18 are also relevant here, and they would ensure no person would have to participate if they did not want to for any reason. I therefore don't believe amendments 76 to 79 are necessary or would strengthen the bill. In fact, they could potentially limit the availability of relevant health professionals able to provide the substance and be with the person on the day of death. This is something Scottish Government appears to have noted too, while observing that such an approach may set a precedent of health and care professionals being accompanied when they have to attend to people in their homes to deliver other services, and the resource implications of that could be significant. I will do.
I know what he's saying, and in a sense he's right. But would he also observe that this is these are amendments that are being brought forward following the RCN requesting those amendments, that i.e. that the profession themselves are asking for these restrictions, and I just wonder why he thinks that those observations and indeed requests should be rejected.
It's a fair point, and in my engagement with RCN, there have been requests that they've made which I've been sort of happy and able to accede to. I think in relation to this requirement for a second nurse to be present, I think that is disproportionate. I think there's nothing in the bill that would prevent that happening, and I'm sure that that would happen. I think what we've discussed at stage one, committee will have heard that in other jurisdictions over a period of time what one sees is an increase in the number of people who are able to access it, partly through the raised public awareness, but also I think through a growing familiarity of medical professionals with the process and procedures, and a willingness to engage with that process. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if in the early stages what one did see is a situation where nurses may seek to have an additional nurse present. But as we've seen in other jurisdictions, over time that tends to cease to be the case. So the provision allows for that to happen. I think my concern is that the amendment would mandate that in every instance, and I think that is, in a sense, disproportionate and would certainly, I think, have an impact on access to this choice for some terminally ill adults. Yes, of course.
So I think I'm minded to support Jackie Bailey's amendment here, and I understand the rationale that Daniel Johnson's trying to narrate here. So we currently have a system where 2 registered nurses administer a controlled drug. So I don't understand why you would be so averse to that being in statute as a protection for those nurses carrying out their duties were they to be participating in assisted dying.
As I say, it's an argument I understand the rationale for which, I mean, particularly where you're dealing with the introduction of a new piece of legislation. I think what I'd be concerned about is putting in place something that then prevails going forward in a way that reduces access to the choice in a way that I believe is disproportionate. The example that's cited by yourself, Convener, and indeed Jackie Bailey, is certainly the case, but there are many instances where that provision is not required, and yet one still sees examples of additional nurses being present to provide whatever support is felt to be necessary, but that it isn't a statutory provision for them to do so. And I think striking the balance here by allowing that to happen in the expectation that in the early stages that may well be the case more often than not, but not binding that in through statute to be a requirement that, as I say, could have an impact on the accessibility of this choice. I certainly will. Yeah.
On that. So I suppose I'm just wanting to expand on that. So that current practice is that 2 registered nurses would witness the administration of a controlled drug, would witness the drawing up of that drug if you were drawing it up into a syringe, or the pouring of that into a medicine cup. So there's 2 witnesses there. There's protection there for those nurses that the drug that they've administered is the correct one, is the correct dose, that is going to the right person. I don't understand why something as final as medication to be used in assisted dying wouldn't have those same protections for the staff who are participating in that, because this is about protecting the nurses, and I'll put on record that a bank nurse with NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, because I haven't done that yet. So I just don't understand what the members' resistance is to putting this protection in there for nurses who would perhaps be participating within this practice?
I think, as I say, I echo the concerns that the government themselves have laid out in their commentary on the amendments, that actually the consequences of applying this practice, this provision across the board could be significant in terms of the resource implications. I'll give way to Emma Harper.
So, thank you. Just on the back of the convener's point, I myself am still a registered nurse. My understanding is that nurses do go into a patient's home on their own to refill or recharge a syringe driver, for instance, that contains morphine, fentanyl, antiemetics, drugs as well. So, I am concerned about nurses going in on their own, for instance, and I am taking on board what you're saying about they can choose to have somebody in the beginning. So that is just a point I'm trying to seek clarity on, about nurses are already able to act independently in a patient's home, managing these kind of devices.
Yeah, I think that's let me respond to this and I'll come back to you in a minute, Ms. Bailey. I think that's an entirely fair point. There are examples of where, as the convener and Jackie Bailey have intimated, there is a requirement at present. It would be wrong, I think, to assume that this happens in instances where one could draw kind of parallels in terms of the actions that are being undertaken by nurses who will be acting independently within a person's home, which I suspect is the point again that the Scottish Government are making in terms of their commentary on these particular amendments. And I'd give way to Jackie Bailey.
Thank you very much to Liam MacArthur. I mean, this isn't an everyday occurrence. This is very unusual, highly sensitive, and I think, as you have acknowledged yourself, we're not talking about a huge number of people that will be impacted by your bill. Consequently, I don't think, given that we're not talking about significant numbers, that issues about access being limited are valid in this instance. I would, of course, say that it's very difficult for a nurse placed in a position where they are alone to advocate for themselves, to say, no, I don't want to do this by myself, and cause unnecessary delay. If you've built it in from the start, then that's the expectation. And I think if we want effective implementation of your bill, then we need to assure those who are likely to be significant participants in it, i.e. nurses, that we have their interests at heart. So I would urge you to accept these amendments because I think they add to the bill itself.
Can I thank Jackie Bailey for that intervention, and indeed other colleagues. As I say, I know from my own direct engagement with the RCN how strongly they feel about this. I do have my misgivings. I think members of the committee will have heard an exposition of both sides of the argument and the points that Emma Harper was, I think, very fairly making, and we'll have to take a view on these amendments accordingly. Sue Webber's Amendment 176, related to a previously debated Amendment 158, would require the coordinating registered medical practitioners to inform the terminally ill adult of potential side effects and risks of complications when providing the substance. Again, I'd note it's already a requirement under Section 7 that the registered medical practitioners carrying out their assessments must explain the nature of the substance to be provided, including how it will bring about death. Marie McNair's Amendment 244 proposes an avoidance of doubt provision to confirm that a person can't administer the substance to or on behalf of another person. I consider the bill already suitably safeguarded to prevent this, but I have no strong objections to Ms McNair's amendment, and thank her for lodging it. Daniel Jones's Amendment 10 adds details around the provision of the substance process. From the outset, I've wanted the end-of-life process set out in as much detail as possible, and I've been clear the approved substance could be self-administered by the terminally ill adult in a range of ways. Given the bill empowers Scottish ministers to approve the substance to be used, it was felt the best approach was to leave further detail on how this substance was to be prepared and used to be set out in regulations and guidance. In policy terms, I've always been clear that assistance must be via self-administration by the terminally ill adult. Ultimately, assistance can be anything that contributes to the person's own deliberate act and which does not tip over into administering the substance. I also would point members to the guidance provision in section 23(1), which allows the Scottish Ministers to prepare and publish guidance about the Act, and section 23(2) lists particular areas on which Ministers may wish to issue guidance, including, quote, the provision of assistance in accordance with section 15. Such guidance would be consulted on in advance, allowing input from medical professionals and others, ensuring any resulting guidance reflects those views. In terms of the part of the amendment allowing the coordinating registered medical practitioner to prepare a device to allow the person to take the substance if needed, this is an issue which came up during stage 1. I'm certainly sympathetic in policy terms to considering what may be able to be done to enable a person to self-administer in different circumstances, as I suggested to committee at stage 1. The Scottish Government states it recognises the detail set out in the amendment is likely to be welcomed by healthcare professionals based on the stage 1 evidence. The Government also noted the amendment doesn't make reference to the authorised health professional who may also carry out functions under section 15. Daniel Johnson may wish to reflect on those comments, but I'm certainly supportive of the amendment in principle. Turning to Sue Webber's Amendment 182, this inserts a new provision into Section 15 to the effect that the existing criminal law relating to homicide applies to any act by a person to provide additional substances, treatment, etc. to the terminally ill adult after they have used the approved substance for the purpose of bringing about death. Section 1(2) of my bill details that assistance is lawfully provided if it is provided in accordance with the provisions of the Act. By necessity, any assistance that was not in line with those provisions would be clearly unlawful. The explanatory note on Section 19 makes clear that the exemption from criminal liability under Section 19 only applies where the substance of the case against the individual is or would be that they provided a person with assistance to end their life under the bill. It does not apply to any incidental unlawful acts which an individual may have committed. Amendment 182 is therefore not necessary and might, by singling out one specific situation, create uncertainty. There are several amendments in this group from various members which address the issue of notifying and recording instances of the substance not having its intended effect, including Sue Webber's Amendments 181 and 183, Stuart Macmillan's Amendment 184, Paul Sweeney's Amendments 245 and 275, and Stephen Kerr's Amendments 126 and 188. With regard to Amendments 181 and 183, Amendment 181 covers situations where the adult uses the substance provided but does not die or the substance has not produced its intended effect within a period to be specified by the coordinating doctor or authorised health professional. Provides that the coordinating registered medical practitioner or authorised health professional must, in such circumstances, take all reasonable steps to preserve the adult's life or reverse any effects of the substance. Such incidents must be recorded in writing, and details of what's required to be recorded are set out. The amendment stipulates that no declaration or statements made by the adult under bill provisions can prevent steps to preserve their life unless the adult refuses any such intervention at the time and has capacity to do so. As was clear in the evidence at stage 1, the number of cases where a person takes an end-of-life substance and does not die and where complications arrive is incredibly small. Even so, given that the bill provides for the coordinating registered medical practitioner or authorised health professional to be present when the substance is used and until a person has died, should any complications arise, the attending health professional would respond in a manner consistent with their skills, training, qualifications and experience, and provide necessary care to the person. I'd also refer the committee to the detailed evidence it received from Professor Dooley, which confirmed the Australian experience that while most deaths occur very quickly, the exact timing can be based on factors such as a patient's condition, size, weight and overall health. Given this natural variability, Ms Webber's amendment risks placing unworkable requirements on clinicians and potentially undermining the practical integrity of any medication protocol. So I don't support Amendment 181, nor Amendments 125 and 136 from Bob Doris, which refer to dying within a reasonable period. Sue Webber's Amendment 183 requires that the coordinating registered medical practitioner must A, record in the adult's medical records any complications arising from the used substance, and B, submit an anonymised report to Public Health Scotland. Broadly, Stuart Macmillan's Amendment 184 appears to duplicate Amendment 183, as do Paul Sweeney's Amendments 245 and 275, along with Amendments 289 in a later group, which also addresses the reporting of any complications. Likewise, Stephen Kerr's Amendments 126 and 188. I've considered these amendments carefully. Members will know that Section 27 of the Bill requires a 5-year review of the operation of the Act and is intended to deal specifically with the functioning of the Act, that is supporting terminally ill adults in being lawfully provided with assistance to end their own life. However, the Bill also provides that any concerns with the operation of the Act which have been raised must also be covered in the report, as well as the Scottish Government's response to those concerns. However, I acknowledge that there is nothing in the Bill specifically about the recording and reporting of issues such as complications, and on reflection agree the Bill may benefit from being strengthened in that regard. As we have, I will take an intervention for Sue Webber.
Thank you, Mr MacArthur. You mentioned previously about how the clinicians would have concerns in terms of the dosage given a patient's state in terms of obesity and all these other factors. So surely you must agree that recording of the complications and how death proceeds will help the medical professionals learn and change their methods so that they can in fact address some of those issues that you stated previously.
I thank Ms Webber for the intervention. I'm not sure if it was caught. I couldn't tell whether the microphone was on, but nevertheless, I think Sue Webber makes a reasonable point. The point I was making about the variability was more in relation to setting aside or specifying a time, whether deemed reasonable or by which death is expected to occur. I think, as I was suggesting, on reflection, finding ways of strengthening the bill by the recording of the considerations outlined, not just by yourself, Ms Webber. Let me just respond to Sue Webber and then I'll let you in, Mr Doris. But responding to those, the concerns that are reflected in a number of amendments, each trying to, I think, to do something similar but in different ways, is something I'm happy to look at doing. I'm not sure necessarily I would be supportive of any of the amendments that are lodged, but I'm happy to work with the members and indeed Scottish Government to see if there are ways of better reflecting that in the bill ahead of stage 3, and I'll take an intervention from Bob Dorrance.
Unfortunately, Ms McCarthy, you're taking lots of amendment for myself during the stage 2 process. Just a brief intervention in relation to death within a reasonable period, and I think Ms McCarthy talked about the challenges and how we'd arrive at that, but surely to goodness, if someone's ingested the substance and 3 hours has passed, 4 hours has passed, 5 hours has passed, there has to be some kind of guidance out there to cover the medical profession over when they should intervene, how they should intervene, what powers they have when they intervene. And I'll say much more than that when I get to my amendments, but surely to goodness there has to be some kind of framework for medical professionals to operate within.
I thank Bob Dawson. I think this is probably the disadvantage of speaking to my amendment and the other amendments before I've had the opportunity to hear Mr Doris set out the rationale for his. As I say, I have misgivings about the way that is phrased, but I recognise the point that Mr Doris is making, and indeed that is made, I think, in the range of amendments we've seen in this area. I think the bill would benefit from further clarification around these points. I'm not sure it's captured in any of the amendments that have been lodged, albeit that those amendments have allowed that discussion to take place, and I hope we can address those ahead of stage 3. With regard to Stuart Macmillan's Amendment 187, the bill provides for Scottish ministers to regulate for the use of an approved substance and requires ministers to consult ahead of any regulations being laid. I fully expect such consultation to include the Chief Medical Officer. The regulating power would also allow Scottish ministers to regulate to remove a substance if appropriate, so don't believe Amendment 187 is needed. I also note the Government's view that it is normally for the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency to advise on suitability, safety, side effects, quality, efficacy, dose, full product life cycle and post-licensing review of drugs licensed for a purpose. Finally, regarding Patrick Harvey's Amendments 127 and 137 regarding safe access zones, I'm conscious that I haven't heard him speak to his amendments yet. I understand the rationale for lodging these amendments, not least in the light of legislation recently passed by this Parliament. The purpose of that legislation is to designate zones which can protect patients and staff from activities that cause distress and intimidation. Given the sensitivities surrounding the debate on assisted dying, I understand the need to ensure those seeking and providing assistance are not subject to harassment and intimidation. I note that the amendments would allow but not require ministers to regulate for safe access zones for premises in which assistance may be provided, which is important as this would need careful reflection and consideration, given that assistance may, for example, be provided in a person's home. This alone would make requiring such zones to be established problematic. The Scottish Government appear to agree with this point, while further noting that there are existing laws in place which would provide some protection. So I don't believe these provisions are necessary, although would observe that the proposed 5-year review of the Act would allow this issue to be revisited at a later date and with a clearer understanding of the experience in practice. It's perhaps worth acknowledging, however, that this does not seem to be a feature in other jurisdictions where assisted dying laws are in place. But as I say, I'm conscious that I'm commenting on amendments I haven't heard the member speak to, so I will listen with interest to what he has to say. And with that, Convener, I'll bring my remarks to a close. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr MacArthur. Bob Doris to speak to Stuart McMillan's Amendment 184 and to the amendment in his name, Amendment 125 and other amendments in the group.
Thank you, Convener. I will make sure I don't conflate Mr McMillan's amendments with my own. So let me start off with Mr McMillan's amendments. And as the point Mr Harvey made, the words I'm using are from Mr McMillan's views rather than my own, some of which I will agree with, others perhaps not, but you know, let's see how that goes, Convener. So Mr McMillan has got amendments 184 and 187. The bill gives the responsibility for approving substances used in assisted dying to the Scottish Government ministers. That sounds simple, but in practice it creates two serious problems. First, if the minister of the day is opposed to assisted dying, they could frustrate the operation of the law entirely by approving no substance at all. Second, and more concerning, if substances are approved, the bill contains no mechanism to ensure they are safe, effective or humane. International experience has shown us the dangers of this omission. In other jurisdictions, it is contended that poorly monitored substances have led to choking, vomiting, pulmonary complications and tragically prolonged deaths lasting many hours or even days. Parliament cannot, in good conscience, legislate for assisted dying whilst leaving the safety of such substance to ministerial discretion alone. This amendment establishes a framework for proper oversight and accountability. It requires that any substance approved for use under this Act must receive parliamentary approval and renewal every 3 years. Before renewal, ministers would be required to lay a detailed report before Parliament on the safety, side effects and ongoing suitability of those substances. In addition, coordinating practitioners would be required to record and report any complications or deviations from the expected outcome. This ensures that Parliament, not ministers alone, retains responsibility for integrity of the process. It also ensures that, where substances cause unnecessary suffering, action is taken quickly and transparently. Amendment 187 follows that, in light of this reporting and better understanding of the safety of the drugs involved, Parliament can review after 3 years to ensure that the drugs are being used safely, effectively and side effects properly understood and monitored. This is vital to ensuring that deaths are not lingering, painful or distressful on the patient or their families. From research in other countries, and as the committee heard at stage 1 and last week, the drugs used are potent and can have significant side effects. Monitoring that impact is the only responsible course of Parliament for Parliament to take that cares about how this legislation is to work in practice, and allowing the Parliament to review after 3 years gives us the safeguard that we intend to ensure the legislation is working as intended. So those are the comments from Mr McMillan in relation to amendments 184 and 187. Convener, do you wish me to go on to my
Yes, please.
comments? Okay, thank you. Convener, my amendment 125 and the related consequential amendment at 136 addresses a gap in the bill regarding the duties placed upon health and social care practitioners if, following the planned ingestion of an approved substance provided to end their life, the person doesn't die within a reasonable time frame. Amendment 125 therefore states the Scottish Ministers must by regulations make provision that the management of cases where a terminally ill adult has used the substance provided to end their own life in accordance with this Act but has not died within a reasonable period. A reasonable period must also be specified within the regulations. I don't wish to speculate as to how often this scenario might arise. I suspect there will be various opinions, and we'll hear some of that during exchanges on day 2 of the committee deliberations of stage 2 actually, and I think it involved a kind of almost a four-way discussion between Sue Beber, Emma Harper, Brian Whittle, and I think Joe Fitzpatrick were part of a conversation around how often that may or may not happen. However, that is actually to miss the wider point. Since this scenario will happen, if only occasionally, there is a need for guidance so that professionals and the public know what process should be followed in such circumstances. Such a scenario potentially raises many complex and difficult questions of a legal, ethical and practical nature. And indeed, I think colleagues have been wrestling with great thoughtfulness in this group on all those questions still this morning. For example, if the person is unconscious, should they be killed by administration of further lethal substance, which after all would be euthanising that particular individual against the policy intent of the legislation? Should or could such a step be taken without consent? What should the approach be if the person doesn't have capacity? What information should be given about such scenarios to people requesting assisted dying? Indeed, yes, of course.
Can I thank Bob Doris for taking the intervention? He's right, this is a very sensitive area, and I think there is an understandable desire for as much clarity as possible. Would he accept that at present the guidance in place to medical professionals in terms of situations such as this, making the patient as comfortable as possible? I think he's certainly right in terms of any expectation that the application of additional substance we provided is not what would be expected, but that the provisions under the guidance that exists at the moment, I think would cover this situation adequately. And I think there's a risk in putting that sort of detail on the face of legislation, which we don't have in any other instance.
I thank Liam MacArthur for that intervention. I don't agree, Mr MacArthur, because current circumstances is that we don't have assisted dying. We haven't legislated for assisted dying, and the ingestion of the drug in question is to bring about death, not to make the individual comfortable while still living. So right now the guidance is, I would say, pretty much silent in relation to this and has to be developed. I would also note that my amendment, and I'll say more about this in a moment, is not to put this on the face of the bill, but rather to have it in regulation by affirmative procedure, because I accept, the same as I think Mr MacArthur does, that it is really challenging to put all of this on the face of the bill. And I think there's a wider consultation, actually, which an affirmative process would provide. So that's how I would respond to that. Now, if members recall a previous amendment of mine, I know we've lots of amendments over the last couple of sessions, where I wish to ensure that coordinating medical practitioners should have a conversation with the person seeking assisted death about various matters, including the provision of the substance used at the end of life. Indeed, Amendment 91, which was disposed of this morning, was not agreed to, which would have made that happen. And Mr MacArthur has referred to provision 7.1 to say that these matters are not required because the provisions already exist within the bill. But if I go to 7.1, I think this is important, Convener, to put on the record, it does exist. It does indeed exist within the bill in a whole variety of ways, including the one I just cited, but it's caveated by and qualified by insofar as the registered medical practitioner considers appropriate. So there is no requirement under section 7.1, and we need clarity on that. The clinician is empowered but not required. Those are two very different things. I think it's important to put that on the record. But yes, absolutely.
I'm very grateful, and there's a balance here, as in many other areas, about the extent to which we leave matters to the discretion of individual medical practitioners, and where we lay out in terms in the bill a requirement on medical practitioners to act in a particular way. There will be different views on that, I think, within the profession themselves, going down the route of requirements and cutting across either the professional judgment of medical practitioners or indeed interfering with the doctor-patient relationship is something I suspect that BMA and others may be distinctly uncomfortable with. I recognise that this is a procedure we're dealing with that feels more significant perhaps than other areas of medicine, but I think the safeguards that are in here are more likely to operate effectively if they're consistent with the way in which medical practice operates more generally.
If possible, can I just respond to Mr MacArthur first? I think I would reflect on Mr MacArthur by first of all saying, of course, I'd be very interested in what the BMA's thoughts are on all of this, but as the bill is drafted, I don't want to rehearse the arguments from before, but in terms of diagnosis and prognosis, treatments available, palliative care, other care available, the nature of substance, including how their death may come about, are all empowered but not required. So the outcome could be that any individual clinician does not have to discuss any of these things whatsoever. I think there should be a framework there to support clinicians in those conversations. And of course, if the person seeking assisted dying does not wish to have those conversations, that would be the right of the person seeking assisted dying. And I think the bill actually, in some respects, is silent on this by having everything caveated by insofar as the registered medical practitioner considers appropriate. That would be my view in relation to that. Sue Webber.
Thank you briefly, Mr Doris. Thank you for letting me in, because I'm not aware when the member introducing the bill states that the way that medical practice operates more generally. In all the years I've been working within healthcare, I'm not familiar with any situation where individual clinicians are encouraged to do their own thing. I think there are strict guidance and procedures for everything in terms of pathways for all sorts of treatments. Would you not agree that not having something similar for a procedure such as this would not be going or representing medical practice as it operates more generally?
Crikey, Ms Webber, I feel myself now playing devil's advocate on both sides of the debate because actually I believe that a framework is required for clinicians. There should be support and guidance for clinicians, but ultimately there has to be a degree of discretion and professional judgment made in circumstances as well. But that professional judgment cannot be made in a vacuum, and I feel Mr MacArthur's bill would have us make some of that in a vacuum, and I'm not sure, whilst I agree with the point Sue Webber's making, whether or not that could be too stringent, which is why I go back to my amendments here now this afternoon, and to say that is why this should be dealt with not in the face of the bill, but by regulation and consultation. I think that's important. I would love to have a brief intervention, Mr Fitzpatrick. Yes.
Thanks very much, and thanks for this. Has been a really interesting discussion here. I wonder if, given the fact that even the member found himself on two sides of an argument, maybe this is a point where it might be better if the member doesn't push. I'm very sympathetic to what he's trying to achieve. He doesn't push and has that discussion, and maybe see if there's a way forward that can get wider support at stage 3.
So I think, Ms Fitzpatrick, thank you very much. I'm not really on both sides of the argument, because the bill doesn't really give provisions. The member in charge of the bill says that we shouldn't put that on the face of the bill. I agree with the member to a large extent. I want that to be in regulations, and my amendment says that should be in regulations. So I would intend pushing that particular amendment to see what the views of the committee are. And of course, if not successful, I mean, you'll sit and bring it back at stage 3, at which point I'd be delighted to work with Mr MacArthur to get the balance right in relation to that. Convener, returning to my pre-prepared reflections, complex questions like this are best dealt with through detailed guidance, as I think I've tried to make that point, rather than on the face of the bill. But the requirement for guidance must be on the bill, and that's what the amendment seeks to do. Those complex questions must be worked through, and the amendment places a duty on Scottish ministers to consult on such matters before laying draft regulations under the affirmative process. Regulations that, for fairly obvious reasons, must be in place before applications for assisted dying are to be made should the bill becomes law. And I'm minded the exchange, I think, between Douglas Ross and Liam MacArthur, where the discussion was around whether the clinician should be inside or outside the room so they can actually attend and take action as required we're not actually sure what action would be permitted. So that has to be clarified before we even have a debate about the clinicians be inside or outside the room. Amendment 125 and its consequential amendments will provide the certainty of a framework under which medical professionals should operate on such occasions. And I'll draw my remarks to a close there, Convener.
Thank you, Mr Doris. Paul Sweeney to speak to Amendment 245 and other amendments in the group.
Thank you, Convener. My amendments 245 and 275 aim to strengthen the practical framework for administration of assisted dying safely and responsibly. They would require the Scottish Ministers to provide proper training for doctors and to publish detailed guidance on what to do if complications arise, including what constitutes a reasonable period before death and how to respond to side effects or even failed medication, however rare this may occur. Without this, clinicians could face serious medical legal risk if problems do arise during the final stages of the assisted dying process. The amendments also create a duty to report any such problems to Public Health Scotland, ensuring issues of safety are captured and analysed to inform ongoing review and improvement of the assisted dying service. Together, I believe that these measures ensure safety and consistency during the most sensitive stage of the assisted dying process. I'm also aware that the member in charge of the bill will be seeking engagement with UK government ministers in regards to safeguards, and this is certainly something that I think would also be being sought by ministers at UK government level. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Sweeney. Patrick Harvey to speak to Amendment 127 and other amendments in the group.
Thank you, Convener. I'll just speak to 127 and 137, the two amendments in my own name. As Liam MacArthur, I think, perhaps anticipated when he commented on this, I've lodged these largely as probing amendments for discussion. I was curious as to both Liam MacArthur's response to the issue and to the committee, if anybody else wants to speak to it. As members will be aware, in fact, recall from very recently, just last year, Parliament passed by a very overwhelming majority legislation to allow safe access zones in relation to abortion services. Abortion services, of course, are also an issue which can be contentious, divisive within society, and are generally regarded as a conscience matter by most political parties, as the issues covered in this bill are. And we have seen in places around Scotland a significant number of protests targeting the sites where abortion services are provided and impacting in a negative way on those who are accessing services, as well as on professionals who are working in those locations. As Liam MacArthur said, there have been protests in some other jurisdictions where assisted dying takes place, but not necessarily targeted at specific sites. The one instance where end-of-life issues have given rise to protest in this country relate to different circumstances, not to assisted dying as such, and I think probably fair to say generated as much by online activity and not necessarily accurate information as by the issue itself. I was mostly concerned to have this discussion in the context of the possibility that Parliament might have agreed to organisational opt-outs if the discussion that we had last week had gone a different way. I was concerned that if organisations, providers of hospice or care home facilities were under pressure to make an organisational decision about whether they supported or did not support their residents to be able to access assistance provided under the bill, then they could have become targets of the kind of protest that we've seen in relation to abortion services. Given that the committee so far doesn't seem to have gone down that route, I think at the moment I'm minded not to press or not to move rather these amendments when we come to them, but I'll obviously want to see how a discussion on other amendments goes and perhaps revisit the discussion at least at stage 3, even if only for the purposes of debate.
Thank you, Mr Harvey. Ryan Whittle to wind up and press or withdraw Amendment 173.
Thank you, Convener. And in pressing my Amendment 173, I have to comment that the way in which a lot of these amendments are being dealt with, both by the member Lee MacArthur and the committee, are leading me to increasing disquiet. We have amendments here that I brought forward on behalf of the Royal Pharmaceutical Society, and Jackie Bailey brought forward in front a request for the RCN, and I remind these are the actual people who will be at the delivery end of this bill should it pass. And I worry that there's pushback against both of those because, in my view, they are the experts, and their views have to be taken into consideration. I think medicine is not an exact science, and as we've heard, however rare, there will be adverse reactions to medicines. And I previously tried to put some sort of protection in place through advanced care directives to protect against any liability of a medical professional in the case that something goes wrong. I think that, and it's been raised very well by colleagues from across the table here, both Douglas Ross, Bob Doris, Sue Webber, Paul Sweeney have all raised the same issues. In that, quite frankly, I don't think the bill, as it's currently drafted, takes into consideration or addresses properly what happens in the rare occurrence when something goes wrong. And if of course I'll give way.
I'm grateful to the member for allowing an intervention. I take the point, and I hear the member's discomfort with some of the discussion. But would he acknowledge that the member in charge of the bill has indicated openness to addressing some of the issues around how, in those rare circumstances that Brian Whittle describes, the correct information can be recorded? Liam MacArthur said he's not convinced that any particular variant of that is quite right as proposed at stage 2, but he has indicated willingness to work toward a consensual way of capturing that information at stage 3. Would it not be reasonable for all of the members who want to see change in that area to collaborate in that spirit?
I do recognise Mr MacArthur's ongoing willingness to work with members and to collaborate on the bill. I do recognise that, but the presumption is that none of the other members within here have actually spoken to each other about this previously. And in fact, in bringing forward some of our amendments, we have, there would have been many more amendments duplicated had we not. I think that to date there have been so many issues around safeguarding that have been put forward by members and have been rejected that it concerns me. And that I've put it on record here that I voted for the principles of the bill at stage 1, and I hadn't decided which side of the argument I would fall on come stage 3, but I did say there'd have to be significant changes to the bill in round safeguarding if I was ever to support it at stage 3. And I think that specifically around pharmacy and around the RCN's request to both myself and to Jackie Bailey and to Daniel Johnson to bring forward amendments because they're concerned, because it's their members who have to deliver on this bill, and for them to be pushed back against, you have to be concerning. Mr Johnson.
I'm very grateful to Brian Whittle-Giveaway. I wonder if he might agree with me that there are actually two fundamental points here. First of all, I think it is important that safeguards are put in place, especially when they're being brought forward by the professionals. But secondly, as we proceed, given the sensitivity, we also have to be seen to be providing those safeguards. And those are actually two very important purposes, because actually that second point provides some very strong signals, but also clarification of principles that we want to see if this bill is to be enacted and to be done so safely and with the confidence of the people that we're going to be asking to deliver it. I wonder if you would agree those two distinct points.
I thank Daniel Johnson for that information. I couldn't agree with him more. I think the signalling that comes out of here is incredibly important, and because we've already had a session on this, many of us will have had responses, emails, discussions with the general public, with the medical profession, that are raising concerns, because this is whatever else we say. We're talking about. I know Liam MacArthur talks about precedence in medical. The way in which medicine is delivered. This is unprecedented. We are asking medical professionals to, whose whole principle is around do no harm. We are asking medical professions to do something that they have never done before. So we have to take their views into consideration. We have to make sure that that there is the likelihood of any liability of a medical professional is minimised, which is why I will at stage 3 will bring back advanced care directives, which is why, should some of these amendments be pushed back against by the committee, will be brought back again. Of course.
I'm very grateful to Brian Whittle for taking the intervention and for his generous comments about the approach I've taken to this bill, and that remains the case. I would observe that I've been supportive of amendments from, I think, pretty much everybody that has lodged an amendment. That's not to say that I've been supportive of every amendment, but in many instances I've accepted the point that's been made. I think I would ask Brian Whittle maybe to reflect on the fact that even if the principle is one that can be supported, I don't think it's in anybody's interest to pass amendments that may have unintended consequences or not do what it is that the member pressing it would wish it to do, which is why at stage 2 we have an opportunity to explore that, and at stage 3 we'll have an opportunity to refine it. In many instances, that's what I've committed to doing. So I think this is like any other bill where you see a lot of amendments brought forward at stage 2 to allow the debate to take place. That doesn't necessarily mean that all those amendments will be accepted, but I think should result in the bill being strengthened and improved going into stage 3, where further strengthening and improvement can take place, and that's something I'm committed to do.
And can I thank Liam MacArthur for that intervention? I welcome the way in which Liam MacArthur has engaged with members from across the chamber, but I would disagree with him. This is not like any other bill we've ever had. This is very different from anything we've been asked to do before. My concern here is that if we don't manage to deliver some of the changes that we want, some of the safeguards that we've tried to put forward, be that they have to be reworded, if we don't do that, it becomes increasingly difficult for people like myself who sit on, who haven't made a decision one way or the other. It becomes increasingly difficult to be able to support that principle. So I would urge Mr MacArthur to consider what I've said, also the committee to consider what has been said there, and with that, convener, I move 173.
Press Amendment 173. Thank you very much. The question is that Amendment 173 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee is agreed. I call Amendment 174 in the name of Brian Whittle, already debated with Amendment 220. Brian Whittle, to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 174 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee is not agreed, so we will have a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 174? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 174 is 4-3 against 4, and there is 1 abstention. The amendment is therefore not agreed. I call Amendment 175 in the name of Brian Whittle, already debated with Amendment 173. Brian Whittle, to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 175 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee is not agreed, so we'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 175? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 175 is 3 for, 4 against. There was 1 abstention. Therefore, the amendment is not agreed. I call Amendment 76 in the name of Jackie Bailey, already debated with Amendment 173. Jackie Bailey to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 76 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee's not agreed. We'll have a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 76? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 76 is 4 against 3 with 1 abstention. Therefore, the amendment is agreed to. I call Amendment 77 in the name of Jackie Bailey, already debated with Amendment 173. Jackie Bailey to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 77 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee is not agreed, so we'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 77? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 77 is 4 against 3 with 1 abstention. Therefore, the amendment is agreed. I call Amendment 124 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 220. Bob Doris to move or not move?
Not moved.
I call Amendment 176 in the name of Sue Webber, already debated with Amendment 173. Sue Webber to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 176 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee's not agreed. We'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 176? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 176 is 4 against 4. There was 1 abstention. Therefore, the amendment is not agreed. I call Amendment 224 in the name of Marie McNair, already debated with Amendment 244. Yeah, that's what I said. In the name of Marie McNair, already debated with Amendment 173. Bob Doris to move or not move?
I'll move 244 on behalf of Marie McNair.
The question is that Amendment 244 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. I call Amendment 78 in the name of Jackie Bailey, already debated with Amendment 173. Jackie Bailey to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 78 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee is not agreed, so we'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 78? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 78 is 4 for, 3 against, with 1 abstention. Therefore, the amendment is agreed. I call Amendment 10 in the name of Daniel Johnson, already debated with Amendment 173. Daniel Johnson, to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 10 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Yes. I call Amendment 79 in the name of Jackie Bailey, already debated with Amendment 173. Jackie Bailey, to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 79 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Committee is not agreed. We'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 79? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 79 is 4 for, against 3, 1 abstention. Therefore, the amendment is agreed. Call Amendment 177 in the name of Brian Whittle, already debated with Amendment 173. Brian Whittle, to move or not move?
Move, please.
The question is that Amendment 177 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee is not agreed. We'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 177? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 177 is 4-3, against 4. There was 1 abstention, and therefore the amendment is not agreed. I call Amendment 178 in the name of Brian Whittle, already debated with Amendment 173. Brian Whittle, to move or not moved?
Moved, please.
The question is that Amendment 178 be agreed. Are we all agreed? No. The committee is not agreed, and we'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 178? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 178 is 4-3, against 4. There was 1 abstention, and therefore the amendment is not agreed. I call Amendment 179 in the name of Douglas Ross, already debated with Amendment 173. Douglas Ross, to move or not move?
Move, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 179 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee is not agreed, and we'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 179? Those against? Abstentions? result of the vote on Amendment 179 is 3-4, 4 against. There was 1 abstention, therefore the amendment is not agreed. I call Amendment 180 in the name of Brian Whittle, already debated with Amendment 173. I remind members that if Amendment 180 is agreed to, I cannot call Amendment 33. Brian Whittle to move or not move?
Not move.
I call Amendment 33 in the name of Liam MacArthur, already debated with Amendment 173. Liam MacArthur to move or not move?
Move, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 33 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Committee is not agreed, so we will move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 33? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 33 is 4-7. There is 1 vote against, therefore the amendment is agreed. There were no abstentions. I call Amendment 181 in the name of Sue Webber, already debated with Amendment 173. Sue Webber to move or not move?
Moved, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 181 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee is not agreed. We'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 181? Those against? Any abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 181 is 1-4, 7 against. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. I call Amendment 182 in the name of Sue Webber, already debated with Amendment 173. Sue Webber to move or not move?
Moved again, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 182 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee is not agreed. We'll move to vote. Those in favour of Amendment 182? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 182 is 4-2 against 6. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. I call Amendment 183 in the name of Sue Webber, already debated with Amendment 173. Sue Webber to move or not move?
Moved, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 183 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee is not agreed, so we'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 183? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 183 is 4-4 against 4. I would therefore, as convener, use my casting vote and vote in favour of the amendment.
So the amendment is
agreed to. I call Amendment 184 in the name of Stuart McMillan, already debated with Amendment 173. Stuart McMillan to move or not move?
Move, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 184 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Committee is not agreed. We'll move to vote. Those in favour of Amendment 184. Those against? Any abstentions? Result of the vote on Amendment 184, 5 for the amendment, 3 against. There were no abstentions and the amendment is therefore agreed. Call Amendment 245 in the name of Paul Sweeney, already debated with Amendment 173. Paul Sweeney, to move or not move?
Move, Convener.
Question is that Amendment 245 be agreed. Are we all agreed? Committee is not agreed. We'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 245? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 245 is 4, 3 against 4. There was 1 abstention, therefore the amendment is not agreed. I call Amendment 185 in the name of Brian Whittle, already debated with Amendment 173. Brian Whittle, to move or not move?
Moved, please.
The question is that Amendment 185 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee is not agreed. We'll therefore move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 185? Those against? Abstentions? Result of the vote on Amendment 185 is 4, 3 against 4, 1 abstention. Therefore, the amendment is not agreed to. Call Amendment 34 in the name of Liam MacArthur, already debated with Amendment 65. Liam MacArthur, to move or not move?
Move.
I call Amendment 34A in the name of Liam MacArthur, already debated with Amendment 65. Liam MacArthur, to move or not move?
Also moved, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 34A be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed. I call Amendment 34B in the name of Paul Sweeney, already debated with Amendment 65. Paul Sweeney, to move or not move?
Move, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 34B be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Committee is agreed. Liam MacArthur, to press or withdraw Amendment 34 as amended. The question is that Amendment 34 as amended be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Call Amendment 70 in the name of Jackie Bailey, already debated with Amendment 65. Jackie Bailey, to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 70 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. Committee is not agreed and we'll move to a vote. Those in favour of Amendment 70? Those against? Abstentions? Results of the vote on Amendment 70, 4, 3, against 4, There's one abstention, therefore the amendment is not agreed to. I call Amendment 186 in the name of Miles Briggs, already debated with Amendment 151. Miles Briggs, to move or not move?
Not moved.
Not moved. I call Amendment 35 in the name of Liam MacArthur, already debated with Amendment 65. Liam MacArthur, to move or not move?
Move.
I call Amendment 35A in the name of Liam MacArthur, already debated with Amendment 65. Liam MacArthur, to move or not move?
Again moved.
The question is that Amendment 35A be agreed to. Are we all agreed? I call Amendment 35B in the name of Liam MacArthur, already debated with Amendment 65. Liam MacArthur, to move or not move?
Move.
The question is that Amendment 35B be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Liam MacArthur, to press or withdraw Amendment 35?
Press, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 35 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The question is that Section 15 be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. I call Amendment 125 in the name of Bob Doris, already debated with Amendment 173. Bob Doris, to move or not move? The question is that Amendment 125 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee is not agreed. We will vote. Those in favour of Amendment 125. Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 125 is 2 for, 5 against, 1 abstention. The amendment is therefore not agreed. I call Amendment 187 in the name of Stuart McMillan, already debated with Amendment 173. Stuart McMillan, to move or not move?
Move, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 187 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee is not agreed. Those in favour of Amendment 187? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 187 is 3 for, 5 against. There were no abstentions and the amendment is therefore not agreed. I call Amendment 126 in the name of Stephen Kerr, already debated with Amendment 173. Douglas Ross, to move or not move?
Move, Convener.
The question is that Amendment 126 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Committee is not agreed. We'll move to a vote. Those in favour of the amendment? Those against? Any abstentions? The result of the vote on Amendment 126 is 3 for, 5 against. There were no abstentions and therefore the amendment is not agreed to. And the question is that Section 16 be agreed. Are we all agreed? And with that conclusion of Section 16, I am going to suspend this meeting until 6 p.m. this evening.